Chapter 2151. He exited the Flying Heavens sect with his original appearance, and appeared at the foot of the Great Dream sect. A young man in purple was standing at the foot of the mountain, motionless like a tree or a sword, piercing the sky with an imposing manner. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. It was a familiar face, Song Yukuan. He took a step forward and Song Yukuan's expression changed when he saw him. "It's you again." Chu Li smiled and closed-fist saluted. "How have you been?" "Thanks to you, I've been well." Song Yukuan gritted his teeth and said slowly. He had been desperately cultivating and even learned a forbidden skill. In the end, he was punished to guard the door at the foot of the mountain for 3 years. He could forget about enjoying himself for 3 years and could only become a door god. Chu Li smiled. "A master like you still wants to guard the door. Your sect is really impressive." "Shut up," Song Yukuan scoffed. "You're looking for senior brother Feng, right?" Chu Li shook his head. "I want to see your sect leader." "Impossible," Song Yukuan scoffed. "Not everyone wants to see the sect leader. You don't have the right." Chu Li took out a letter and waved it. He smiled. "I'll leave now. Don't blame me if you mess things up," he said and turned to leave. "Wait!" Song Yukuan shouted. "Wait!" As he spoke, he turned around and disappeared in a flash. He had already entered the sect's protective array to report. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror and his expression changed. He appeared 200 miles away in a flash. He appeared at the peak of a mountain and landed 100 meters away from I Ching Song. 10 great Asuras were attacking I Ching Song with all their might. I Ching Song was on the verge of collapsing. His face was golden and his vitality was like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. His attacks were slow and heavy. He was not a threat at all as he was continuously attacked by the 10 great Asuras. They hit I Ching Song's body. I Ching Song's body swayed, but he did not fly away. He could not reduce the force at all. His body was getting more and more damage. If he did not have the physique of an Asura, he would have died a long time ago. In a flash, Chu Li rushed into the screen of 10 great Asura's fists and palms. Then, as light as a feather, he landed beside I Ching Song and picked him up to escape. He wanted to void shift, but he could not do it. The formation formed by the 10 great Asuras had sealed off the void. As soon as I Ching Song was lifted up by him, all the strength in his body seemed to disappear. He felt so weak, as if his bones had been taken away. He forced his eyes wide open and said, "The jade pendant in my bosom." Chu Li nodded, but he could not free his hands. He had to lift him up with one hand and use his other hand to block the attack. He used the palm energy to change his body movement technique and avoided the surging palm energy by a hair's breadth. I Ching Song stretched his hand into his bosom with great difficulty. However, he discovered that he could not break the jade pendant. Darkness surged before his eyes, and he nearly fainted. Chu Li hurriedly transferred some inner energy of the cloud slashing power to I Ching Song. I Ching Song's spirit was instantly lifted, and he had a little bit of strength. Chu Li suddenly shouted, "I can only use my ultimate skill now." His body suddenly expanded, and he shouted, "Demonic disintegration!" The 10 great Asuras took 2 steps back. At that moment, they were grabbed by Chu Li and in a flash, they escaped the formation of the 10 great Asuras. Then, they rushed out like a shadow. "Ah!" The 10 great Asuras roared angrily. They chased after him like a madman. Chu Li's speed was like lightning, and he was slowly increasing the distance between them. The 10 great Asuras' light body technique was far inferior to his. In the blink of an eye, they had traveled 200 miles. Chu Li had already appeared at the foot of the Great Dream Sect's mountain. Song Yukuan appeared at the foot of the mountain. When he saw Chu Li and I Ching Song, his expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly shouted, "Wu Yuanci, what are you doing?" Chu Li shouted, "Hurry up and help them." Song Yukuan was stunned. I Ching Song hurriedly said, "Senior brother Song, Quickly bring us in. Song Yukuan had already seen the 10 great Asuras rushing over like lightning. He knew that he had made a mistake, so he hurriedly pulled the 2 of them into the sect protection formation. The 10 great Asuras behind them could only stop in front of the formation. They turned around and left, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Song Yukuan supported I Ching Song and hurriedly asked, "Junior brother E, what happened?" "I was chased. It was all thanks to Brother Wu's help. Otherwise, I would have really died in their hands." I Ching Song struggled to shake his head. Chu Li's inner energy continuously flowed into his body to heal his injuries. The cloud slashing power was extremely effective in healing injuries. Otherwise, I Ching Song would have fainted by now and would not have the strength to speak. "Who is it?" Song Yukuan sneered. "How audacious!" I Ching Song hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. "I want to see the sect leader." Just in time. Wu Yuanci wants to see the sect leader too. "Let's go together," Song Yukuan said. The 3 of them quickly walked up to the sect leader's basilica and saw the sect leader, Qing Yuan. Qing Yuan was dressed in a purple robe and sat quietly behind the desk. He was holding a scroll in his hand instead of a dossier. He had delicate features, was tall and thin, and looked refined. He did not have the imposing manner of a sect leader at all. Instead, he was gentle and friendly, not giving off a sense of oppression. He looked at Chu Li and I Ching Song with a smile. I Ching Song said in a low voice, "Sect leader." Qing Yuan looked at him and smiled. "One who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later on. Don't look so sad. Being assassinated is not a big deal. Wait a moment. Young Master Wu has come to visit. May I know why?" Chu Li gave a fist salute and presented the letter with both hands. Song Yukuan took it and passed it to Qing Yuan. Qing Yuan opened it and glanced at it. He nodded. "All right, thank you. Yukuan, bring young Master Wu to rest." Chu Li said, "Sect leader Qing, there's no need to trouble yourself. I want to go back as soon as possible. I'll write a letter for you tomorrow." Qing Yuan smiled. Chu Li gave a fist salute and left the main hall. He walked down with Song Yukuan and entered a small courtyard. Qing Yuan watched them leave and turned to look at I Ching Song. "Who was it?" "Great Asura." I Ching Song's face darkened. He said in a low voice, "Sect leader, someone must have leaked my identity. If not, why would they suddenly try to assassinate me when I have no enmity with them?" Qing Yuan nodded. "There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall. This day has finally come. You're quite lucky. If it wasn't for Wu Yuanci, my life would have been in danger." I Ching Song said, 10 great Asuras." He shook his head as his heart palpitated. If he died, even if he was immortal, he might not be able to continue cultivating the heavenly demonic power even if he was resurrected. More importantly, once he died, the heart of Asura would immediately return to the Asura boundary. It would be impossible for him to escape. Qing Yuan said, "Don't go out for a while. Cultivate in isolation." "Yes." I Ching Song sighed. "Don't worry, I'll avenge you." Qing Yuan smiled. "The person who leaked the news must pay the price. We must let everyone know that the Great Dream Sect is not to be trifled with." "Sect leader, could it be?" I Ching Song frowned. "It seems like no one else knows my identity." "No." Qing Yuan shook his head. "I'm not worried about that. The disciples of our sect will never leak it." "That's strange." I Ching Song sighed. He gave a fist salute. "I'll go back first." Chapter 2152. I Ching Song looked at Qing Yuan curiously. Qing Yuan opened the small box and took out a bead. It was pure and flawless like an ice sculpture. It was bright and soft, emitting a clear light. When he saw it, he felt refreshed and relaxed. I Ching Song asked curiously, "Sect Master, this is?" "This is the Dragon Sting Pearl." Qing Yuan smiled. "It's the best treasure in our flower viewing technique. The two complement each other and are omniscient. I want to see who leaked the news. I Ching-song said, Is it hard to deduce? Let's try, Qing Yuan said. He placed the longan-sized bead on his forehead and touched it gently. Then, he let go of his hand. The bead disappeared as if it had merged into his forehead, causing I Ching-song's eyes to widen. Qing Yuan ignored him and slowly closed his eyes, motionless as if he had fallen asleep. His aura became weaker and weaker until there was nothing left, as if he had died. This made I Ching-song a little worried. He wished he could go forward and check his pulse and forehead. However, his remaining rationality stopped him from doing so. I Ching-song stared at Qing Yuan with wide eyes. Qing Yuan was motionless as if he was dead, but the top of his head gradually emitted light. There was a faint light flowing on his forehead, as if the dragon sting pearl had jumped out of his forehead and was glowing. However, when he took a closer look, there was nothing, as if everything was an illusion. He widened his eyes from time to time, then closed them and opened them again, competing with himself to know if it was his illusion. After an unknown period of time, Qing Yuan suddenly opened his eyes, and a dragon's sting pearl appeared in his hand. I Ching-song looked at the dragon's sting pearl in confusion. He felt a little strange. How did this dragon's sting pearl appear? Qing Yuan looked at him calmly. I Ching-song hurriedly said, Sect Master, did you find out? Yes. Qing Yuan nodded. Go back first. I will deal with it myself. Sect Master, I'm very curious. If I don't find out, I won't be able to rest easy. I Ching-song hurriedly said, Tell me, who leaked the secret? Tianfeng sect. Qing Yuan smiled faintly. I really underestimated this Su Ziliang. He has such courage and such powerful method. I really can't judge a person by his appearance. I thought he was a reckless and unwise guy. The Tianfeng sect? I Ching-song said in surprise. That's not right. How did the Tianfeng sect know my identity? I've never seen anyone from the Tianfeng sect before. It's nothing more than someone borrowing a knife to kill someone, Qing Yuan said. I Ching-song said, Who? Think about it. Who are the enemies of the Heavenly Wind sect? What are their grudges? Qing Yuan smiled faintly and said, Nothing more than benefits and grudges. I Ching-song frowned. It can't be the Flying Heaven sect, right? Brother Wu just saved me. Saving is saving, and using is using. These are two different things. Qing Yuan said calmly, Zhao Lingfeng's actions were unethical, but it has nothing to do with Wu Yuanci. He cannot influence Zhao Lingfeng's actions. Then, I Ching-song felt a little awkward. Qing Yuan said, The two sects haven't started fighting, so there's no enmity between the two sections. There's nothing wrong with you two being friends, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Besides, since Wu Yuanci saved you, you should spare the Flying Heaven sect this once. Yes. I Ching-song heaved a sigh of relief. If he did not repay Wu Yuanci for saving his life, he would not be able to rest easy. Although he was an Azura, he did not consider himself a pure Azura. He was not that cold-blooded and cruel. Qing Yuan smiled and said, You can rest assured now, right? Yes. I Ching-song nodded. How do you plan to deal with the Heavenly Wind sect, faction leader? That's easy. Qing Yuan said, We'll just help the Flying Heaven sect. Wu Yuanci saved your life, so consider it a form of repayment. The Great Dream sect has always been grateful for a drop of water. Thank you, faction leader. I Ching-song was overjoyed. But don't worry about this in the future. Focus on your cultivation, Qing Yuan said. This time, if your cultivation level was high enough to match Wu Yuanci's, you wouldn't have been in such a sorry state. You almost lost your life, but you killed them. I Ching-song lowered his head and looked ashamed. He made rapid progress in his cultivation. In fact, he was already feeling a little complacent. He wanted to restrain himself, but he could not. That was because he saw his cultivation level rising, catching up to those who had been cultivating for 10 years, 20 years, and even catching up to his senior brothers who had been cultivating for 30 years. He was unconsciously proud of himself and wanted to go out and show the results of his cultivation. In the end, he almost lost his life. Only then did he realize that he was still far from being able to match up to the young Wu Yuanci. What was there to be proud of? Go. Qing Yuan smiled. Fortune and misfortune came hand in hand. The assassination this time made I Ching Song feel ashamed and dispelled his arrogance. If he could settle down and cultivate, his cultivation speed would be even faster. The day he became a top-notch expert was just around the corner. He could almost see the Azuras dying one by one under his palm. The assassination of 10 great Azuras had already angered I Ching Song and provoked his murderous intent. With another fuse, it would be easy for him to form a strong murderous aura and destroy the Azuras. This matter was interesting. It saved him the trouble of planning, framing, and promoting his hatred towards the Azuras. The great Azuras came to kill him directly. It was obvious that they did not care about him now, but they were worried about him in the future, afraid that the rumors would come true. After this, the great Azuras would continue to try to assassinate him. They would come one after another in an endless stream. He understood these Azuras. They were all stubborn. They would kill whoever they wanted to kill, and they would not turn back even if they ran into a wall. In this way, it would further agitate I Ching Song. In the end, it would incite his anger and hatred towards all Azuras, and he would retaliate. Once he retaliated, the hatred would deepen and could not be resolved. Only one side could be destroyed. In the evening, after eating, he sat in a small courtyard to cultivate. He heard footsteps. When he saw it was I Ching Song, he went forward and opened the door. I Ching Song gave a fist salute and smiled. "I'm not disturbing Brother Wu, am I?" "You're welcome." Chu Li invited him in. He looked him up and down and smiled. "Brother E, your physique is amazing. You've recovered so quickly." I Ching Song smiled. "My physique is indeed special. Otherwise, I would have died before Brother Wu arrived." Chu Li nodded. "Aren't the Azuras working with your sect? Why would they surround and kill you, Brother E?" His current identity was Wu Yuanci, not I Ching Shi. He could only play dumb. Having too many identities was a test of memory. If it were not for his outstanding memory, he would easily get confused and make mistakes. I Ching Song said, "It's a long story. Brother Wu, please keep it a secret for me." He felt that since Zhao Lingfeng knew about his background, Wu Yuanci would eventually find out as well. It was better to be honest with him. Chu Li quickly nodded. I Ching Song sighed. "I'm actually an Azura too, but my physique has been weak since young. I can't cultivate." Chu Li pretended to be surprised. "Azura? From what I know, all Azuras can cultivate the Azura power technique, right? They learned it without a teacher." Chapter 2153. Chu Li frowned and said, "Almost everyone can cultivate, but not you, Brother E. I'm sure you've suffered a lot and suffered a lot." Sigh. "I can't bear to look back on the past." I Ching Song shook his head sadly. Chu Li patted his shoulder and smiled. "But after suffering comes happiness. Being able to enter the Great Dream sect is something that many people are envious of. People like me don't have the qualifications to enter the Great Dream sect." "That's true." I Ching Song nodded. "If it wasn't for the sect leader who brought me back, I would still be suffering and thinking of suicide." Chu Li asked, "Then why are the great Azuras after you?" "It's because of a legend." I Ching Song sighed. "It's an unexpected disaster. It's said that Azuras who can cultivate the heavenly demonic power have the power to destroy other Azuras." "What a joke. If that's true, I wouldn't have almost been killed by the great Azuras." Chu Li frowned. "I think I've heard of this legend too. Could it be fake?" "It's not that real." I Ching Song shook his head. "I tested it myself this time. There's no threat at all." Chu Li said, "I don't know who spread the rumor, but it's full of ulterior motives. Those great Azuras found out about your identity, and because of that rumor, they wanted to kill you to prevent any accidents from happening. What if it's true? Yes. I Ching Song nodded. Chu Li smiled. That's strange. Brother E, your identity should be kept a secret, right? How did someone find out about it and even tell the Azuras? According to the sect leader's deduction, sect leader Zhao revealed it to sect leader Su from the Tianfeng sect. Then, sect leader Su revealed it to the Azuras. I Ching Song said. Chu Li's expression changed and he stood up. Impossible. I Ching Song waved his hand and smiled. Brother Wu, don't worry. Sect leader Zhao is capable of finding out about my identity. There aren't many people in the sect who know about my identity, but sect leader Zhao knows about it. It's amazing. Chu Li frowned. Why did the sect leader reveal your identity to sect leader Su? I guess he wanted to get someone else to do his dirty work. I Ching Song said. I almost lost. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. The sect leader underestimated sect leader Cheng. Exactly. I Ching Song sighed and said, it's hard to hide anything from the sect master. It all depends on whether he wants to know or not. As long as he wants to know, there's no way to hide it from him. Sect Master Zhao's cleverness may have led to his own downfall. Chu Li said, then sect leader Qing wants to teach my sect leader a lesson? I won't. I Ching Song smiled. Brother Wu, since you've saved me, the sect leader will not teach sect leader Zhao a lesson. Instead, he will fulfill sect leader Zhao's wish and teach the Heavenly Wind sect a lesson. Chu Li sighed. This, I Ching Song waved his hand and said, although my life is insignificant, as a disciple of the Great Dream faction, I will repay you for your kindness. Brother Wu, you don't have to be so polite. Chu Li solemnly gave a fist salute. All right. He then changed the topic and said with a smile, I think, Brother E, your conclusion is too early. You can't destroy Azura now because your cultivation level is not high enough. If you reach Sect Master Cheng's level in the future, you might be able to destroy Azura. Sect Leader. I Ching Song smiled bitterly. Chu Li said, with your qualifications, Brother E, it's not wishful thinking, it's very easy to achieve. I hope so, I Ching Song said. Chu Li smiled and said, Brother E, you have to cultivate quickly. You're now the target of all Azura. If you really provoke them, I'm afraid even the Great Dream faction won't be able to stop them. Yes. I Ching Song nodded firmly. The two then talked about their experiences. Chu Li suddenly stood up. Brother E, let's have a spar. It'll be beneficial for your cultivation. This. I Ching Song shook his head and said, I'm not your opponent, Brother Wu. You're not as good as me now, but you can easily catch up to me. Come on, Chu Li said. He wanted to find out what was so special about I Ching Song's inner energy and how he could destroy Azura. If he could analyze the principle of his inner energy, he might be able to achieve the same effect if he simulated it himself. He felt that Qing Yuan had the same idea. All right. I Ching Song finally nodded happily. He actually had the same idea as well. Sparring with a master, especially a master like Wu Yuanxi, was extremely beneficial for cultivation. The two stood facing each other. Then, I Ching Song lightly struck out with his palm. Chu Li smiled and received it. When the two palms were close, Wu Yuanxi suddenly turned his palm into a claw and his nails slashed at I Ching Song's wrist. The change of move was sudden and swift, giving I Ching Song almost no chance to dodge. However, I Ching Song turned his wrist in time and pointed at Chu Li's palm. His response was perfect, as if he had predicted Chu Li's move. Chu Li rotated his fingers like a wheel and slashed at I Ching Song's fingers. I Ching Song curled his fingers into a fist and punched. Bam! The two finally clashed and each took a step back. Chu Li was shocked. Good cultivation. I Ching Song was shocked. He had actually used a secret skill to stimulate his potential, but they were still evenly matched. It seemed that he was still far from being able to match Wu Yuanxi. This Wu Yuanci was really unpredictable. The two clashed again with their fists and palms. They fought back and forth, the changes of their moves were sudden and exquisite. Chu Li was really impressed by Yi Qingsong's talent. He had cultivated for such a short time but had such a deep understanding of the move. He was really talented. After all, Wu Yuanci's flying divine demonic claw had grasped the essence and the changes were already top-notch. Although Yi Qingsong used the secret skill to stimulate his potential, his inner energy cultivation was still far inferior to Wu Yuanci. Wu Yuanci was just hiding it, but Yi Qingsong was able to block him with his moves. After a while, Chu Li took 2 steps back and shook his head with a smile. Amazing! Yi Qingsong felt that Chu Li was deliberately letting him win and did not use his full cultivation. Although he was depressed, he was also very impressed. After all, Yi Qingsong was really talented in the changes of his move. Moreover, he had the dream flower visualization technique from the dream sect, which bought him time to adapt. If he did not have the dream flower visualization technique, he would not have been able to block 10 moves. Yi Qingsong fist saluted. Brother Wu, thank you for your advice. Chu Li said, Brother Yi, with your talent, I can't help but believe the rumor. Yi Qingsong smiled and did not say anything else. He fist saluted and left. If he stayed any longer, the secret skill would disappear and his face would be very ugly. He did not want Chu Li to see him in a sorry state. After Yi Qingsong left, Chu Li turned around and sat by the stone table. In his mind, he replayed the previous moves. He played them over and over again. Not only the moves but also the heart technique that matched them. Then, he began to deduce his heart technique and inner energy. He felt the difference in his inner energy and tried to use Yi Qingsong's heart technique. In the end, he shook his head helplessly. It was the same heart technique, but the inner energy that was used was completely different. Yi Qingsong's inner energy had a strange aura that he could not get. It seemed like it was an aura unique to Azura. He frowned and thought for a while. In the end, he gave up trying again. There was no other way at the moment. In the future, when his cultivation level was higher and the Heavenly Star Insight technique became more powerful, there might be hope. Chapter 2154. Huang Tianyi's robe was as white as snow and his face was as white as jade. When he stood with Zhao Lingfeng, they looked like a perfect couple. Zhao Lingfeng sized him up and asked, Why didn't you return to the Grandmaster's realm? Did something happen? He had instructed Chu Li to return to the Grandmaster's realm with the letter and not waste any more time in case Zhu Lingying tried anything funny. He did not expect Chu Li to return with a serious expression. Chu Li fist saluted and smiled at Huang Tianyi. He told Zhao Lingfeng, Leader, when I went to Demeng sect, I coincidentally ran into Yi Qingsong being surrounded by 10 great Azuras. I saved him. Yi Qingsong? Great Azura? Zhao Lingfeng's expression changed. Chu Li nodded slowly. Sect leader Su from Tianfeng sect revealed Yi Qingsong's identity to Azura. This was personally deduced by sect leader Qing from Great Dream sect, and he also deduced that you were involved in the incident. Zhao Lingfeng's expression darkened and he smirked. I underestimated Su Ziliang's viciousness. Huang Tianyi frowned. I underestimated his viciousness. Zhao Lingfeng asked, and Chu Li said, Because I saved Yi Qingsong, Leader Qing will not pursue this matter but he will punish Tianfeng sect. Huang Tianyi chuckled. This is in line with Demeng sect's style of doing things. If you offend them, they will retaliate 100-fold. If you do them a favor, they will repay you 100-fold. Chu Li nodded. Zhao Lingfeng sighed and said, All right. This time, we managed to weaken the Heavenly Wind sect by accident. He felt aggrieved and uncomfortable, but it happened in front of Huang Tianyi. He glared at Chu Li and scoffed, You're quite lucky, young man. He realized that Chu Li's luck was amazing. Not only did he have a fortuitous encounter, he also had this kind of thing. Saving I Ching Song would bring him endless benefit. Not only would he form a good relationship with the Meng sect, I Ching Song would also accept him wholeheartedly. Their friendship would be deeper than any ordinary friendship. Other than I Ching Song, there was also Morong Cho. They were all rare geniuses. To be able to become friends with these geniuses and have a close relationship with them, in the future, there would be endless benefits. It was an intangible influence. Once he became the sect master, the Flying Heaven sect would also receive endless benefit. The position of sect master must be passed on to him. Chu Li smiled and closed fist saluted. Sect leader, the Tianfeng faction has been targeted by the Dream faction, so there's nothing to fear anymore. Yes, I will go to the Great Dream Clan. Zhao Lingfeng waved his hand and said, You don't have to worry about these things. Chu Li nodded and gave a fist salute to Huang Tianyi. He then turned to Zhao Lingfeng and said, I'll take my leave then. Go. Zhao Lingfeng said, Since you've saved I Ching Song, I'm sure clan leader Qing will put in a good word for you, and Zhu Lingying will be easier to get along with. Yes. Chu Li nodded and turned to leave. Inside a restaurant in the city of 10,000 Swords, Chu Li and Zhu Lingying sat at a table by the window, the same table they had sat at before. They drank and chatted leisurely, looking no different from the people around them. Chu Li took out a letter and handed it over. Zhu Lingying took it and quickly read through it, then looked up at Chu Li. A smile slowly appeared on his face, and it became wider and wider. All right, thank you very much. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. Zhu Lingying kept the letter and stood up. Then wait for my good news. Chu Li closed fist saluted and watched as Zhu Lingying walked out of the restaurant with his hands behind his back. He strolled along the street and returned to the inner city of 10,000 Swords. He went into his house and destroyed the letter, then headed to the center of the inner city, and soon entered a basilica. The omniscient mirror could not see the basilica clearly, as there was an invisible force blocking it. Chu Li slowly stared at the basilica, drinking and eating with a relaxed expression on his face. About half an hour later, Zhu Lingying came out of the basilica, holding a waist tag in his hand. Chu Li's omniscient mirror saw the word Wu written on the waist tag, and immediately knew that it was his waist tag. This Zhu Lingying was quite capable. He actually got a waist tag for himself. The city of 10,000 Swords was loose on the outside, but tight on the inside. It was not easy to sneak in, and this waist tag was not easy to get. The next morning, he was channeling on his bed, using the spiritual energy from the first heaven to cleanse and strengthen his body. Zhu Lingying knocked on the door. He went to answer the door with a smile. Zhu Lingying entered the house and sat on the armchair, then tossed the waist tag to Chu Li. This is the waist tag to enter the inner city. You must not lose it, or else it will be troublesome to get another one, very troublesome. Chu Li nodded. Zhu Lingying continued, After you enter, if there are no accidents, you will become a registered disciple. Chu Li nodded and looked at him without saying a word. Zhu Lingying asked, Nothing to ask? Chu Li shook his head. Zhu Lingying scoffed. Don't you want to ask why I'm a registered disciple and not a real disciple? Chu Li smiled. It's not that easy to become a real disciple. You're smart. Zhu Lingying nodded in satisfaction. You'll be a registered disciple for 2 years first. Once you're familiar with them and gain their trust, then you'll have the chance to become a real disciple. It's impossible to achieve instant success. Chu Li nodded slowly. Zhu Lingying said, Not everyone can become a registered disciple. You'll need a real disciple's recommendation and guarantee. If anything happens to you, I won't be able to escape either, so you must be careful. Chu Li smiled and nodded. Senior, don't worry, I won't be in the limelight, I'll stay here obediently. Good. Zhu Lingying clapped his hands and praised him. You're a smart person indeed, staying obediently is the most important thing. You've just arrived, don't think about taking over everything in one go, you have to accumulate it bit by bit. Chu Li looked like he had learned something. Zhu Lungying found Chu Li much more pleasing to the eye and said with satisfaction, "Follow me then." The two of them left the inn. Zhu Lungying did not let Chu Li check out of the room and went straight to the inner city. Chu Li took out his waist tag. The 4 inner city protectors treated Zhu Lungying kindly and were very friendly, but their faces darkened when they saw Chu Li, glaring at him sternly. They placed their hands on the hilt of their swords, carefully checked the waist tag, and then carefully sized Chu Li up. Finally, they returned the waist tag and waved their hands to let him go. Zhu Lungying smiled and thanked them, then led Chu Li into the inner city's gate. Chu Li's hair instantly stood on end, and his entire body was covered in cold sweat. It was as if several treasured swords were placed on top of his head, ready to stab him at any time. If he moved even the slightest bit, he would be stabbed by the swords. However, this sword force was formless and substantial. He could not see it at a glance, and his omniscient mirror could not detect it either. This was obviously a sect protection formation, and it was not even a formation that was activated, but it already gave him such a sense of danger. Once it was activated, he would not be able to survive, even if he had various secret skills. He was on high alert and became more cautious, as if he was walking on thin ice. Fortunately, he was not a real heavenly demon, or else he would really be so guilty that he might not have the courage to go further in. He began to admire Zhu Lungying. It was not easy to come this far. Zhu Lungying turned to look at him, then smiled and nodded, satisfied with his performance. If he could not keep his cool, his expression would have changed by now. He said in a low voice, "We're going to meet the hall leader of the sword crafting hall, Hu Tianfang." Chu Li nodded without saying a word. The two of them walked inside until they arrived in front of a basilica. Zhu Lungying fist saluted toward the basilica and said, "Hall leader, my nephew is here. Come in." A deep voice was heard. Chapter 2155. Chu Li gave a fist salute. "Greetings, clan leader." Hu Tianfang was wielding a giant sword that was as tall as him and as wide as his shoulders. He was like a giant bear wielding a long sword. The blade was black and lusterless. In his hand, it was as light as a wooden plank. If it was not for the strong wind around it, others would not believe that it was a steel sword. It was too heavy. Good. Good. Hu Tianfang sheathed his sword and stood still. His breathing was calm and he was not panting. It was as if he was wielding an ordinary emerald-tipped sword. He smiled as he looked at Chu Li and nodded slowly. "He looks talented. Elder Zhu, since he's your nephew, let him follow you." Zhu Lungying quickly waved his hand. "Clan leader, this is against the rules. Moreover, he won't learn anything from me. My nephew is quite talented, much stronger than me." "Haha, Elder Zhu, you're not satisfied." Hu Tianfang shook his head. Zhu Lungying stepped forward to take the giant sword. His face turned red and his body sank slightly as if it had sunk an inch. Chu Li wanted to help, but Zhu Lungying shook his head. "Haha." Hu Tianfang shook his head and laughed. "Elder Zhu, your strength hasn't grown yet." Zhu Lungying gritted his teeth. His face was already red as he struggled to speak. "Clan leader, it's not that I haven't grown stronger, it's that your sword is heavier." "That's right, it's heavier by 100 pounds. Hu Tianfang smiled. "Put it down, don't force yourself." Zhu Lungying slowly walked to the iron weapon rack on the side and slowly placed the wide black sword on the rack. The ground seemed to tremble, but the weapon rack didn't shake at all. Chu Li sized up the black sword with a curious look on his face. "This is made from meteoric iron." Hu Tianfang smiled. "Young man, you're curious. Why don't you try lifting it up? If you can lift it up, I'll make an exception and let you enter the hall to become a true disciple of the City of 10,000 Swords." Chu Li quickly asked, "Really? I've always been a man of my words." Hu Tianlai waved his hand. "Do you think I can fool a young man like you?" Chu Li took a few steps forward and arrived in front of the weapon rack. He reached out and placed his hand on the broad black sword. He took a deep breath and exerted force with both his hands. The body of the sword swayed slowly. It was about to rise, but then it fell back down again. Chu Li's face turned red and his hands trembled slightly. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. What a heavy sword! Hu Tianfeng, on the other hand, looked at Chu Li curiously and said, "This little fella really surprises me. Such great strength." Chu Li replied, "Clan leader, I've always had great strength since I was young. I was born with divine strength, but I can't believe I can't lift this sword. It's at least 1,000 pounds. That's right, it is indeed 1,200 jin." Hu Tianfeng nodded and said, "What kind of martial arts did you practice?" Chu Li shook his head. "Divine power technique." "Oh, no wonder." Hu Tianlai smiled. "If you didn't practice inner energy, then it would be truly shocking." He was also born with great strength. Not only did he rely on his physical strength, he also relied on the enhancement of his inner strength. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to use his sword technique with just his physical strength alone. Chu Li asked, "Clan leader, can you lift it with your physical strength alone?" Hu Tianfeng was in high spirit. He took a few steps forward and held the hilt of the sword with one hand. With a gentle lift, the broad black sword left the weapon rack. He slowly swung it twice before putting it back on the rack. His arms were as thick as Chu Li's thighs. His muscles were like cast iron and contained explosive strength, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Chu Li praised, "Clan leader, this is the true natural divine strength." Hu Tianlai waved his hand and said, "My strength is great and can be considered as natural divine strength. However, if I didn't persevere in forging swords, I wouldn't have this kind of strength. You're a good material. If you really enter the swordsmithing hall, you'll be able to achieve my strength after forging swords for 2 years." Chu Li looked excited. "However, the rules can't be abolished. You should be a registered disciple first. Elder Zhu, explain the rules to him." Hu Tianfeng said. "Yes, clan leader." Zhu Lingying quickly nodded. He took a good look at Chu Li. He did not expect this young man to be so quick-witted. He looked calm but was quick-witted at crucial moments. He was indeed talented. It was a pity he was not a disciple of the Great Dream Sect. "What a pity!" Hu Tianfeng smiled. "Young man, follow the rules. If there's no problem in 2 years, I'll let you become a real disciple." "Thank you, clan leader." Chu Li fist saluted. Hu Tianfeng waved his hand and gestured for them to leave. Zhu Lingying brought Chu Li out of the basilica. He let out a long sigh and turned to look at him. He did not say anything and continued to walk forward. Chu Li followed closely behind and arrived at a small courtyard. Next to this small courtyard was the city wall, separated from the outer city by only one wall. He could faintly hear the footsteps and noises outside. It was indeed not a good place, but having a small courtyard was enough for him to be content. The treatment of a registered disciple was excellent too. It showed how rich the city of 10,000 swords was. The two of them sat in the middle of his small courtyard. The stone table and stone stools were cold. It was different from the jade tables and stools Chu Li usually saw. Don't be fooled by the clan leader's friendly and easygoing appearance, Zhu Lingying said. He looks rough, but he's actually the opposite. Chu Li was confused. Zhu Lingying said, the clan leader is cold and arrogant. He's also very meticulous. Don't be too nervous in front of him. The more relaxed you are, the better. However, the more relaxed you are, the easier it is for you to make mistakes. You need to carefully grasp the key points. Chu Li's expression was solemn. He nodded slowly. Zhu Lingying let out a long sigh. But you've passed this stage. As long as you behave yourself, you'll be able to become a real disciple. You'll be able to enter the core area and come into contact with more information and antique studies. Chu Li fist saluted. Thank you, senior. Zhu Lingying waved his hand. I didn't tell you about the clan leader's personality because I was afraid you'd be nervous. If you're not nervous, you might make a mistake or act naturally. However, if you're nervous, the clan leader will definitely be suspicious and keep an eye on you. Chu Li nodded. Zhu Lingying said, there will be people coming to arrange your tasks. As a registered disciple, you're just a servant. To put it nicely, you'll have to do everything. Chu Li smiled bitterly. Zhu Lingying said slowly, you're a god's favored one in your hometown, but not here. Chu Li took a deep breath. Don't worry, senior. I can do it. That's good. Zhu Lingying nodded slowly. It still depended on whether he could persevere. If he could not, he would leave. The city of 10,000 swords registered disciples were eliminated very quickly because they could not endure the hardship. This was an iron threshold that no one could escape. Zhu Lingying stood up and left. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror to observe his surroundings. The few courtyards next to him were empty. They were probably all registered disciples. He returned to the outer town and checked out of the inn. He wandered around the outer town and only returned to his courtyard in the inner town in the evening. He saw a few young men sitting at the stone table outside the courtyard. They were holding bowls of rice and wolfing it down. Chapter 2156. Chu Li Fist saluted and looked at them quietly. After a while, the four youths finished eating and looked up at him. They looked at Chu Li from head to toe as if he was a rare creature. Their eyes were filled with pity as they shook their heads. Chu Li gave a fist salute and smiled. I'm Wu Yuanxi, a new registered disciple. Wu Yuanxi. A thin young man nodded and said in a friendly manner, are you also an in-name disciple of Sword Crafting Hall? Yes. Chu Li nodded. Greetings, clan leader Hu. Sigh. The thin young man sighed and said, you entered the wrong hall. Although the sword casting hall is the easiest to enter, it is also the easiest to be eliminated. I'm afraid there are not many of us who can stay. Chu Li looked confused. I haven't asked for the names of my senior brothers. The skinny young man sighed. I am Liang Xingbang, this is Yu Tsang Tsai, this is Zhou Dihao, and this is Guan Tongqing. He pointed at the other three and introduced them one by one. Why did you want to enter Sword Forging Hall? Chu Li said, Uncle recommended him. He's in the Sword Crafting Hall. Who? Liang Xingbang asked. Chu Li smiled. Zhu Lingying. So it's senior brother Zhu. The four of them were suddenly enlightened. They also did not pay much attention to Chu Li, because Zhu Lingying was truly not a big shot, and was doing very badly. Although his seniority was high, as long as they became true disciples, they would quickly surpass him. Chu Li said, I think everyone looks very tired. The four of them were in a sorry state, wolfing down their food as if they had not eaten for days. Clearly, the city of 10,000 swords did not lack food. It could only be that they were too tired and had consumed too much energy. Sigh. Liang Xingbang shook his head and sighed. Us nominal disciples are like donkeys, being driven around desperately. It's really hard to live. The four of us are still fine. Another thin man, Guan Tongqing, shook his head and said, some of us were so tired that we vomited blood. Chu Li was speechless. Liang Xingbang smiled and said, you'll know what it's like tomorrow. The newcomers won't be spared either. They won't give you any time to adapt and will directly work hard. I advise you to sleep early today. Chu Li Fist saluted. Thank you, senior brother Liang. Forget it, we don't know if we'll be able to survive. Liang Xingbang waved his hand and said, persevere for 2 years. A day really feels like a year. If this goes on, I really won't be able to hold on. Older martial brother Liang, hold on a little longer, Guan Tongqing encouraged him. The other two didn't talk much. After eating, they were a little sleepy and lost in thought. It seemed like they were listening to them, but at the same time, they didn't seem to be listening. All right, hurry up and go back to sleep. Liang Xingbang sighed. We still have to wake up early tomorrow. Everyone got up and walked back to their own courtyards. They threw themselves onto the beds in their bedrooms and quickly fell asleep. Chuli, on the other hand, sat in his courtyard and observed the four of them. They all had cultivations, and even though they couldn't be considered profound, they weren't weak. They could be considered experts, yet they were still so tired. It was clear that being an honorary disciple of the sword forging hall was not easy. However, he had a deep understanding of the strength of his own body, so he wasn't worried. He was just a little doubtful. Could he really obtain 9 swords if he continued like this? It seemed that the distance between him and the 9 swords was far beyond his reach. However, now that things had come to this, it was better to wait and see. He needed to be patient, for perhaps an opportunity would suddenly come. The next morning, not long after he woke up, there was a knock on the door. Chuli quickly went forward to open the door. A handsome middle-aged man was standing outside. He closed-fist saluted in a gentle manner. "Are you the honorary disciple, Wu Yuanxi?" Chuli closed-fist saluted. "Yes." "All right, you'll follow Liang Xingbang and the others today," the middle-aged man said gently. "Be careful, don't hurt yourself." Chuli said, "I haven't asked what I'm going to do today, senior." "My surname is Gu," the middle-aged man said gently. "Gu Jiu." Chuli closed-fist saluted. "Senior Martial Brother Gu." Gu Jiu patted his shoulder. "You're going to move iron and stones today." "Yes." Chuli closed-fist saluted and nodded. "Let's go," Gu Jiu said. Chuli followed him out of the courtyard. Liang Xingbang and the other 3 were already standing outside. They looked like they were still sleepy and were yawning. When they saw Gu Jiu, they immediately stopped yawning and looked at Chuli with pity. Chuli smiled and closed-fist saluted at them. Liang Xingbang said, "You don't have to be so polite, Junior Martial Brother Wu. We don't have to be like this." Chuli nodded. They followed Gu Jiu out of the outer town and headed south. Finally, they arrived in front of a towering mountain. They went around a mountain and entered the depths of the valley next to it. From afar, he knew that the valley was covered by a formation. It was difficult for others to see the valley and not enter it. They followed Gu Jiu and walked along a strange path before they finally entered the valley. As soon as he stepped into the valley, he immediately heard a ding-ding sound that rose and fell, and it was continuous and continuous. A tall furnace was set up in the depths of the valley. It was about 10 meters tall and 5 meters in diameter. They could feel the heat from far away. The steaming hot air seemed to heat up the entire valley. The valley had become a furnace. Next to the tall furnace, there were strong men waving huge hammers and hammering on the fiery red iron. Chuli used the omniscient mirror to observe. There were a total of 9 tall furnaces and 18 strong men waving hammers. Next to each of them was a man holding a fiery red iron. Then, there was a cave in the depths of the valley. Iron stones the size of basketballs were constantly being moved out and piled up next to the furnace. Chuli looked at the people moving the iron stones. They were all working hard, but the spherical iron stones they were moving did not seem to be very heavy. The omniscient mirror looked into the cave and saw that the stones were extremely dense. They were much denser than ordinary iron. Gu Jiu turned to look at the 5 of them and said gently, "Everyone knows what to do. Xingbang, take care of Junior Brother Wu. He's new here and doesn't know what to do." "Yes, Senior Brother Gu." Liang Xingbang nodded. Gu Jiu waved his hand and gestured for them to go over. He went to the side and found a middle-aged man who was hammering iron and talked to him. Chuli followed Liang Xingbang and the other 3 into the cave. The cave was wide enough for 3 horse carriages to run side by side. The coldness inside and the heat in the valley were like 2 different worlds. One was summer while the other was winter. The coldness came from the iron stones carried by the people passing by. "This is cold iron," Liang Xingbang said softly. "It's a grade higher than meteoric iron. It can be forged into a treasure sword." Chuli was surprised. "Isn't cold iron from the bottom of the sea?" That's right. This used to be the bottom of the sea. Now it's a mountain. Liang Xingbang said, You should know about the vicissitudes of the world, right? Chu Li nodded in realization. Let's go. Don't be lazy or else you'll have demerits on your record. You won't be able to become a real disciple in the future. Liang Xingbang said softly, It doesn't matter if you're weak. Just do your best. Being lazy is a taboo. Only by doing your best and tiring yourself to the limit can you improve your body and build the foundation for becoming a real disciple. Chu Li said, Thank you, Senior Brother Liang. Chapter 2157. Chu Li quickly rubbed his own face. Liang Xingbang said, It's about time, let's move it out. The other three nodded and lowered their heads to pick up the stones. These stones were almost the same size. Chu Li bent down to pick one up and his body suddenly dropped. This basketball-sized stone was as heavy as a hill. He estimated it to be more than 400 pounds. No wonder the disciples were struggling. He took a deep breath and lifted it easily. He saw Liang Xingbang's eyes wide open and looked at him in shock. Chu Li smiled. I've been strong since I was young. I didn't expect this to be so heavy. Good boy. Liang Xingbang patted his shoulder with a complicated expression. He bent down to pick up a stone and slowly walked out. There were also young men carrying stones passing by. All of them could not be bothered to talk as they moved forward step by step with great difficulty. Their faces were flushed red and they used all of their strength to move forward. However, none of them fell. Although all of them walked with great difficulty and did not look as relaxed as Chu Li, they were able to walk forward step by step steadily. They moved the stones to the side of the blast furnace and then walked back to continue moving them. Walking from the cave to the side of the blast furnace was like walking from winter to summer. Those who were weaker would not be able to take it. However, the disciples were all cultivators, so they were not afraid. Although Chu Li was relaxed, he also acted like it was difficult. He followed Liang Xingbang and the others step by step and did not deliberately show off his strength. Liang Xingbang and the others saw him and nodded in satisfaction. They felt that this boy knew how to conduct himself and they could help him. At noon, they had a meal in the valley. The food was rich and everyone wolfed it down. They worked for the whole afternoon, and when they returned at night, they were really hungry. They could not wait to swallow the food. For the next few days, Chu Li followed Liang Xingbang and the others to do manual labor, moving the cold iron. As he moved the iron, he observed the actions of the people in the valley. Unfortunately, there was only wrought iron here and no swords were forged. They hammered the cold iron into small pieces and shrunk it by a third. The strength they used to hammer was far more than what they used to move the cold iron. He had heard from Liang Xingbang that these people who hammered the iron were also disciples in name. However, when the time came, they would definitely become true disciples. As for them, it would depend on whether they could change from moving the cold iron to hammering the cold iron. Those who could not advance to the next level and become a cold iron hammer had no hope of becoming a true disciple. Chu Li shook his head. He felt that entering the sword crafting hall had nothing to do with the city of 10,000 swords at all. They could only forge swords. If they wanted to forge swords, why would they come to the city of 10,000 swords? Most people came here to practice their swordsmanship. He asked Gu Jiu about it. Gu Jiu was very kind to them and answered all their questions. Even if he didn't know, he would inquire about it and tell them about it. However, the registered disciples were very afraid of Gu Jiu and didn't dare to joke with him. They were all very well behaved and obedient. Chu Li found out from Liang Xingbang that Gu Jiu was the nephew of the hall master of the sword crafting hall. He might have the chance to take over the sword crafting hall in the future. However, Chu Li did not really believe it because Gu Jiu was skinny and had a completely different appearance and personality from Hu Tianfang. Hu Tianfang probably looked down on Gujiu and would not let him inherit the sword crafting hall. In the evening, Chu Li was having his meal when Zhu Lingying came over to his courtyard. She sat by the stone table and watched him eat. Chu Li was not used to eating with Liang Xingbang and the others. He ate alone so he could eat slowly and enjoy the food. The food in the city of 10,000 swords was excellent and the taste was excellent. It was better than the food in restaurants outside. How do you feel? Zhu Lingying smiled at him. Chu Li nodded. It's alright, just a little boring. This is a way to hone one's temperament. Zhu Lingying shook her head and sighed. It trains the disciple's temperament and forges a treasured sword at the same time. It's killing two birds with one stone. The city of 10,000 swords prosperity is not without reason. It's really because of great wisdom. Chu Li smiled. Zhu Lingying said, the tradition of the city of 10,000 swords contains great wisdom. You have to understand it with your heart and you'll benefit greatly. Chu Li nodded slowly and continued eating. Zhu Lingying sighed. I've also slowly made my way here. After spending some time in the beginning, it won't be so painful later on. Chu Li finally finished his meal and smiled. Thank you, Senior. What do you know about the 9 swords? Why do you want to know about the 9 swords? Zhu Lingying smiled. It's impossible to gather all 9 swords because there are 2 missing. One is in the Rain Master Palace and the other is in Chu Li's hands. It's impossible to get it. The remaining 7 swords aren't that powerful. They're used as formation pivots to guard the sect. Chu Li asked, is it really impossible to gather all 9 swords? It's almost impossible. Zhu Lingying shook his head. Actually, the mayor is just doing his best and leaving the rest to fate. Let's not talk about other things. How can the Rain Master Palace get the monarch sword back? Chu Li frowned. They can exchange it with something else, right? It's useless for them to have the treasured sword. The power of the monarch's sword is not something an ordinary person can imagine. If it's combined with the monarch's sword technique, its power will be shocking. Zhu Lingying sighed. It's a pity that the Rain Master Palace only has the sword but not the technique. Chu Li said, is there nothing in the city of 10,000 swords that can move the Rain Master Palace? It's the Rain Master Palace's duty to weaken the city of 10,000 swords, so they'll never return the monarch's sword. Zhu Lingying shook his head. As for Chu Li, he's even more terrifying. Don't even think about it. Chu Li felt strange. The feeling of hearing his name from someone else's mouth and saying it from his own mouth was completely different. Chu Li? Chu Li asked with a smile. Zhu Lingying sighed. A genius suddenly rose and suppressed the other heroes. It's not that the city of 10,000 swords didn't make a move, but unfortunately, they didn't succeed. This Chu Li is too difficult to deal with. Chu Li said, if we can't snatch it by force then we'll try to appease him. I don't believe that Chu Li won't be tempted. Difficult, difficult, difficult. Zhu Lingying said, Chu Li isn't stupid. Not only does he have the sky-killing sword, but he also has the sky-killing technique. With the sky-killing sword, he can run amok. Once he loses the sky-killing sword, his power will be greatly reduced. He won't return the sword. He took out a jade pendant and passed it to Chu Li. I'm under orders to leave the city. There might be danger. Take this jade pendant. Chu Li frowned. Dangerous? A treasured sword has appeared. I'm under orders to snatch it. Zhu Lingying shook his head. It'll be a tough battle. I have to go. I can only hope that my luck is good enough. Chu Li said, we're from the sword crafting hall. We need the sword crafting hall to distinguish the real from the fake, Zhu Lingying said. Don't worry, I won't die that easily. Chu Li said, I just feel that it's too unfair. It's not unfair at all. Zhu Lingying smiled. I love swords too. It's worth the risk to see the divine light sword. Chu Li looked at him doubtfully. Zhu Lingying said, this divine light sword is said to have come from the upper layer of heaven. Its sharpness is unparalleled. It was originally sunk in the sea, but a fisherman accidentally fished it up, causing a fight. Chu Li frowned. The 9 divisions won't make a move? Will it be our turn? The 9 divisions are the 9 divisions, and the city of 10,000 swords is the city of 10,000 swords. We can't just give it to them. Zhu Lungying smiled. We've already forged a divine light sword. If we use it to pass off the fake as the real one, we might have a chance to obtain the real divine light sword. Chapter 2158. Chu Li nodded. He understood how the city of 10,000 swords worked. If he could snatch the divine light sword, he would immediately use the forged fake sword to pass it off as the real one. In order to achieve this, someone had to protect the fake sword as if it was the real one, attract everyone's attention, and secretly bring the real sword back to the city of 10,000 swords. That would be foolproof, and the person holding the fake sword would be the most dangerous. This person would not be Zhu Lungying's turn, because he was from the sword forging hall after all, and his martial arts were limited. If he ran away with a fake sword, others might not be so stupid as to be fooled. Only a top-notch expert would be able to do this. However, even if it wasn't his turn, it wasn't necessarily safe. The danger was still extremely high. Chu Li said, "Senior, why don't I go?" "You?" Zhu Lungying was startled. Chu Li smiled. "I'll transform into your appearance and replace you. How about that?" "No." Zhu Lungying shook his head. "There are too many openings and we'll both fall for it." Chu Li asked, "Are there still people from our sword crafting hall going?" It's not just me." Zhu Lungying's expression softened. Although he felt that Chu Li's suggestion was unreliable, it was rare to have such a thought. He felt warm and his impression of Chu Li became better. He became friendlier to Chu Li and smiled. "Think about it. Once we get our hands on the sword, we have to determine whether it's real or fake. We can't avoid other people using the same trick. One person's judgment might be wrong. This time, 3 people from the sword crafting hall will be going. The clan leader will be going personally." Chu Li came to a sudden realization and sighed. If the clan leader takes action, Senior won't be in so much danger. Hu Tianfang's cultivation was extremely profound, even higher than that of the Flying Heaven sect's Hu Tianlai. Moreover, he had a body full of divine power, so his might was definitely astonishing. With him drawing attention from the side, Zhu Lungying would be in much less danger. Zhu Lungying said, "We're facing the top experts of the world this time. If the heaven-shaking pavilion makes a move as well, then we won't stand a chance at all." Chu Li nodded. "Once the heaven-shaking tower makes a move, we can only blindly join in the fun. Will they make a move then?" "I don't know yet." Zhu Lungying shook her head. "I think it will." Chu Li asked, "Aren't they detached from worldly affairs? Even a small sword could startle them. What happened to their so-called pride and aloofness?" "That depends on the sword," Zhu Lungying said. "Even a top-notch divine sword like the heaven-slaughtering sword might be beneath the notice of the heaven-shaking tower. They are truly too arrogant, but the divine light sword is different." Chu Li looked at him curiously. "The divine light sword is much stronger than the heaven regicide sword?" He revealed a look of disbelief. He had heard that a top-notch divine sword like the heaven-slaughtering sword did not come from this world, but descended from the upper heaven. That was why it had such power. The current swordsmiths were still unable to create such a divine sword. "Much stronger." Zhu Lungying slowly nodded. "It's just that it's not easy to unleash the true power of the divine lightsaber. Normal people aren't fit to be its master. Wielding the divine lightsaber is a complete waste of a treasure." Chu Li sighed. "Yes. A divine sword like the heaven-killing sword is only a treasure sword without the heaven-killing scripture. Is it the same for the divine light sword? Does it need a sword technique to complement it?" It is said that the sword technique of the Divine Light Sword is hidden within the sword. Zhu Lingying said, only the true owner of the Divine Light Sword can obtain this sword technique. Otherwise, it would only be an incomparably sharp treasured sword. Chu Li asked, is it sharper than the 9 blades of the Sword of Monarch? Yes. Zhu Lingying said, the Divine Light Sword is superior, so the city of 10,000 swords must obtain this sword. Otherwise, the city of 10,000 swords will be in danger. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and slowly nodded. If they obtained the Divine Light Sword, they would be able to suppress the 9 blades. The city of 10,000 swords would then have nothing to rely on. Chu Li shook his head. What if the heaven-shaking pavilion obtains it? Then the city of 10,000 swords can only lower their heads and be obedient. Sigh. It'll be better if the heaven-shaking pavilion obtains it. If another sect obtains it, it'll be even more troublesome. They might even force the city of 10,000 swords to work for them. Zhu Lingying sighed. This concerns the future of the city of 10,000 swords. The city of 10,000 swords will do their best. I heard that they will use several swords. Chu Li narrowed his eyes and sighed. Unfortunately, I can't help much. When he heard that Zhu Lingying wanted to use other swords, he could not help but feel excited. His main goal in coming to the city of 10,000 swords was the other 7 swords. As for the Sword of Monarch, it was not difficult to obtain it. The difficult part was to obtain the sword technique of the Sword of Monarch. Without the sword technique, the Sword of Monarch would only be a sharp treasure sword. It would not be powerful enough. The Sword of Monarch was originally given to Song Qingji by him. It would not be difficult to get it back. Song Qingji did not value the Sword of Monarch that much. If he obtained the other 7 swords and combined the 9 swords into one, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the beyond heavenly realm. It would not be difficult for him to kill the Thunder Pool Master. He could even negotiate with the Elders Guild. Zhu Lingying shook his head. Don't think too much. The most important thing for you now is not to reveal any flaws. The heaven-shaking pavilion will inevitably wipe out the heavenly demons in the realm. We must not be implicated. Chu Li nodded solemnly. I know. Keep the jade pendant well. If I don't return it to my hometown, Zhu Lingying said. Chu Li asked, Senior, do you really not want me to go on your behalf? Zhu Lingying shook his head and patted his shoulder. The Divine Light Sword is not something we can covet. I'll be satisfied if I can take a look at it. He was a smart man. He could tell that Chu Li was tempted by the Divine Light Sword. Thus, he had to dispel Chu Li's greed. Once greed arose, one's intelligence would often be concealed. Chu Li nodded. Then I wish you peace. Zhu Lingying nodded with a smile and stood up to leave. Chu Li sat by the table and slowly drank his wine. His mind was wandering. This was a rare opportunity. It would be great if he could obtain all 7 swords. However, it would be extremely difficult. Just thinking about it made him fearful. However, there was only one Divine Light Sword. It should be easier than collecting all 7. How was it stronger than the Heaven Killer Sword? How strong was it? Chu Li was itching to snatch it. As a swordsman, it was difficult to resist the Divine Light Sword. He held the white jade pendant and squinted his eyes. The next day, when he went to the ravine to move the cold iron, he sensed something strange about Gujiu. Gujiu was more serious than usual. He was no longer friendly and easygoing. He rarely chatted with others. His face was dark as if something big had happened. Through the observation of the omniscient mirror, Chu Li knew that Zhu Lingying and the others had been mobilized. Moreover, many people had rushed out of the city of 10,000 swords. There were about 100 of them. They split into several groups and dispersed. The city of 10,000 swords was slightly empty. Chu Li could also feel the weakening of the sect protection formation. When he walked into the inner city, his hair stood on end. The power of the formation had been reduced by half. This meant that 3 or even 4 swords had been taken away. This time, the city of 10,000 swords was going all out and taking a huge risk. If a sect attacked the city of 10,000 swords at this time, the city of 10,000 swords would be in danger. However, at noon that day, 24 elders entered the inner city of the city of 10,000 swords. The power of the formation suddenly increased. Although it was not as strong as before, it was almost the same. Obviously, these 24 elders were old demons with shocking cultivation levels. It was unknown how old they were. Chuli was not in a hurry to find the divine light sword. Instead, he quietly stayed in the city of 10,000 swords as a registered disciple and moved the cold iron. Chapter 2159. As an in-name disciple, it was very difficult for Liang Xingbang and the others to understand what was going on in the city of 10,000 swords. Liang Xingbang and the others only cared about their work. Every day they would be exhausted. After eating, they would sleep. After sleeping, they would work. After eating, they would sleep again. It was as if the outside world had nothing to do with them, regardless of whether it was peaceful or bloody. Chuli kept his eyes on the inner city of 10,000 swords, watching for any movement inside. Elders kept entering the inner city. The atmosphere in the inner city was very serious, and the disciples rarely talked or laughed. He was still a registered disciple, and was not in a hurry to check it out. One morning, he went to the ravine with Liang Xingbang and the others. When they entered the cave, they heard hurried footsteps behind them. The four of them stepped aside, and 3 strong young men rushed over. Chuli frowned and his face darkened. He glared at the backs of the 3 men. Liang Xingbang shook his head and whispered, "Junior brother, don't stoop to their level." Chuli said, "Aren't they being too overbearing? It can't be helped. They have connections." Guan Tongqing scoffed and whispered, "Even if we have connections, we can still be so arrogant." Chuli said, "Is no one going to do anything? Senior brother Gu doesn't care?" Liang Xingbang and the others slowed down, and the distance between them and the 3 men in front of them was getting farther and farther. Liang Xingbang whispered, "It's not that Senior Brother Gu doesn't care, but they act arrogantly when Senior Brother Gu is elsewhere. Once Senior Brother Gu is here, they are more obedient than anyone else. They are very clever. It's just petty tricks. They won't amount to much." Zodi Hao sneered. Chuli said, "Can't you teach him a lesson?" Liang Xingbang quickly said, "Don't stoop to his level. If you really fight, you will be the one at a disadvantage." Chuli sighed and slowly nodded. The 3 men who rushed over just now were the descendants of the disciples of the city of 10,000 swords. Although they had to start as registered disciples, they were almost destined to become true disciples, unless their aptitude was too poor. However, the descendants of the disciples of the city of 10,000 swords were usually not weak. Even if they were weak, they would be far stronger than ordinary people with the help of spirit medicine since young. The person in the lead amongst the 3 of them was called Guohuai, and he was a descendant of the sect master and was the sect master's grandnephew. His age wasn't old, yet he had an experienced appearance, and his methods were extremely slick and brilliant, causing him to be extremely skilled in deceiving those above him. Chuli had just arrived and did not greet the 3 of them. Instead, he showed weakness and flattered them, which made him a thorn in their side. They always wanted to take him down a notch. It was already rare that they did not take the opportunity to mock and ridicule him when he directly barged into them. Chuli did not take them seriously. He felt that they were just children playing around. He could not be bothered to deal with them, but he had to show his anger. The 5 of them entered the depths of the cave. As the number of times they moved the winter iron out increased, as time passed, they had to move the winter iron deeper and deeper into the cave. If they continued to dig like this, they would probably have to dig out a hole and move to another cave. Chuli was carrying a piece of frost iron rock as he slowly walked out of the cave. He seemed to be having a hard time. Liang Xingbang and the others were walking in front of him. They were almost out of the cave when the footsteps behind Chu Li suddenly sped up, as if they were about to bump into him. However, Chu Li did not dodge. It was as if he did not hear anything. He allowed Guo Huai, who was behind him, to crash into him. Guo Huai was a sturdy young man with a handsome and masculine face. His eyes widened in shock as he watched Chu Li fly away. When he rushed towards Chu Li with the frost iron rock, he felt that his footsteps were heavy and that Chu Li would definitely be able to dodge in time. He just wanted to scare him a little, then take the opportunity to mock him and walk away disdainfully. He never thought that Chu Li would not dodge at all. He was hit by the frost iron rock and flew out. He spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. Pfft! Chu Li spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out of the cave. He landed outside with a loud thud. Immediately, everyone looked over. Even the registered disciples who were swinging their hammers stopped and looked over. Gu Jiu was observing the frost iron rock that they had thrown out. He heard the sound and looked over. He saw Chu Li flying out and landing heavily on the ground. In a flash, he appeared in front of Chu Li and quickly channeled his inner energy into him. He then took out a porcelain bottle and poured out 2 pills, stuffing them into Chu Li's mouth. Then, he lightly clapped his hands to help Chu Li digest the pills. He looked at Chu Li with a gloomy face and then looked at the cave. Chu Li closed his eyes. He had already fainted. What happened? Gu Jiu slowly put Chu Li down. His usual friendliness was nowhere to be seen. He asked coldly with a solemn face. Wu Yuanxi's injury had stabilized. It was not a big problem, but he needed to recuperate for a while. It was an internal injury. Although it was a direct impact injury, it was much lighter than an injury caused by inner energy. However, Wu Yuanxi's cultivation level was not high enough, so his recovery was even slower. He would need at least half a month to fully recover. The surrounding people all looked at the cave. Gu Jiu landed lightly in the cave. He saw Guo Huai standing there in a daze. He took a step towards him and asked coldly, "What happened?" Guo Huai seemed to wake up from a dream. He quickly said, "Senior Brother Gu, I'm innocent." Gu Jiu glanced at the 2 frost iron rocks on the ground. The frost iron rock under Guo Huai's feet was still stained with blood. The other one had rolled far away. It was obvious that Guo Huai had thrown the frost iron rock at someone and Wu Yuanxi was the victim. How so? Gu Jiu asked calmly. Guo Huai quickly said, "I was in a hurry to leave and accidentally bumped into Wu Yuanxi. I didn't do it on purpose." "Yes, you didn't do it on purpose. That's why you sent him flying and made him vomit blood. He's injured so badly." Gu Jiu said calmly, "You're saying that he intentionally hurt himself to frame you, am I right? A light touch wouldn't cause him to vomit blood, right?" Guo Huai shook his head and said, "That's too much. Shut up. Go back and wait for your punishment." Gu Jiu waved his hand and said in a deep voice, "Go back and face the wall now. Don't come out." "Yes." Guo Huai gave a fist salute and nodded bitterly. Gu Jiu glared at him coldly and turned to leave. This matter was obvious. He knew Guo Huai's way of doing things. However, Guo Huai was the sect leader's grandnephew after all. He didn't do anything evil, so he turned a blind eye to it. Gu Jiu never thought that Guo Huai would go so far as to do such a thing. Killing fellow disciples was a taboo in the city of 10,000 swords. This time, Guo Huai would be severely punished. When he returned to Chu Li's side, Chu Li had already woken up. Seeing Guo Huai leave with his head held high, he turned to look at Gu Jiu. Gu Jiu smiled and said, "Junior Brother Wu, don't worry. He won't be able to escape punishment. Killing a fellow disciple is a serious crime." It was fine if he scolded Guo Huai, but if he really attacked him, it would be against the city's rules. Chu Li said, "Senior Brother Gu, we're both at fault in this matter." Gu Jiu looked at him. Chu Li said, "Senior Brother Gu did leave in a hurry, but I was distracted and couldn't avoid it. Normally, this wouldn't happen. Gu Jiu nodded slowly. That was right. Although Guo Huai was overbearing, he would not go so far as to hurt someone. As the mayor's grandnephew, he was clear about the sex rules and knew that he couldn't fight. Chu Li said, "Let's forget about it this time. It can only be an accidental injury. It's not killing a fellow disciple." Sigh. Gu Jiu shook his head and sized Chu Li up. "If junior brother Guo knew how magnanimous you are, he would be ashamed." Chu Li smiled. "I'm not that greedy. It's fine as long as nothing happens." Chapter 2160. Gu Jiu personally helped Chu Li back to his courtyard and to his bedroom. Chu Li laid on the bed and said weakly, "Senior brother Gu, it's just a small injury. You don't have to go through so much trouble." "No," Gu Jiu said. Gu Jiu spoke in a low voice. "Your injuries aren't light, but they aren't heavy either. You have to take good care of them, or it'll affect your future cultivation. You have to be careful." Chu Li nodded. "My body has always been strong. Don't worry, senior brother Gu." Gu Jiu said, "Don't be careless. Don't go out for half a month. Just stay here and nurse your injury." Chu Li smiled bitterly. "It's too uncomfortable to lie here. Why don't I go for a walk in the outer town? It'll help me heal faster." "It's good to go to the outer town." Gu Jiu nodded. "Remember not to fight with others. It'll be terrible if you get injured again." Chu Li fist saluted. "Senior brother Gu, go ahead. I'll be careful." "All right, I'll come back at night," Gu Jiu said. He did not take Chu Li's injury seriously. It was just an internal injury caused by a collision. It was nothing complicated. He just needed to nurse it back for a while. Moreover, Chu Li's status was not that high. After he left, the sound of his footsteps faded away. The courtyard returned to silence. Chu Li let out a long sigh of relief and sat up. After channeling for a while, his body recovered. It took him a lot of effort to fake his injury. He had to be precise to injure himself with inner energy. It was no different from injuring himself with a rock. Gu Jiu was a smart person. He could not be fooled easily. It would be troublesome if he was exposed. Through Zhu Lingying's white jade pendant, he felt that the situation was getting tense. There was an opportunity. He suddenly flashed and sensed his location through the white jade pendant. He appeared in a forest and then at the peak of a mountain. He was in a continuous mountain range. There were towering peaks and dense spiritual energy. There were no signs of humans, only beasts. The spiritual energy in the outland realm was dense. There were countless spirit herbs and flowers. Strangely, the beasts here were still normal beasts. They were only slightly stronger than the birds and beasts in the lower realm. They were not at the level of spirit beasts. The spirit beasts in the lower realm and the outland realm seemed to be in the 100,000 hills. He used the omniscient mirror to observe Zhu Lingying's location. Zhu Lingying and 6 middle-aged men were sitting next to a bonfire. The cold air of the early morning had yet to disperse, and they were roasting meat around the bonfire while talking non-stop. Zhu Lingying sat by the fire and did not speak much, listening to Hu Tianzong talking non-stop. The material of this divine light sword is definitely not from our beyond heaven's realm. Hu Tianfong tore off a leg of lamb and took a big bite. Then he praised, "I have seen all the materials in this world. No matter what secret technique they used, they could not make a sharp enough sword. They are not as good as our 9 swords. Old Hu, what else is so special about the divine light sword?" a middle-aged man asked. His figure was thin, and his appearance was mediocre. His expression was gloomy, and the air around him was cold and hard. Hu Tianfong said, "The divine light sword is not an ordinary sword. Not everyone can wield it. I only know that the divine light sword contains the divine light sword technique, and it can only be activated with enough power," the middle-aged man said. "Is there something else special about it? Let's not talk about its sharpness. I heard that this divine light sword can switch between being tangible and intangible. Hu Tianfang said, through the divine light sword technique, it can make the divine light sword invisible. Think about it, how terrifying would that be? It's best to ambush people. The gloomy middle-aged man laughed. Hu Tianfang drew a sword from his back. Suddenly, a light flashed, as if moonlight was gathered on the sword's blade. It gave off an indescribable feeling of coldness. The eyes of the people around him could not help but brighten as they stared straight at the sword. Hu Tianfang smiled as he waved the sword, and cold air filled the air. Good sword. The gloomy middle-aged man praised. The burly middle-aged man next to him said slowly, "This is the divine light sword that we made ourselves?" "That's right, I, the old Hu, personally forged this," Hu Tianfang said proudly. He suddenly threw the sword, and it instantly pierced into the tree opposite him. The sword's blade was in the air, and the hilt was trembling slightly. He pointed at the trembling treasure sword and smiled. If this sword is lying horizontally in midair, and you can't see or feel it when you rush forward, what will happen? Everyone's expression changed slightly. Hu Tianfang said, "Now you know how powerful it is? You can feel danger, right?" The gloomy middle-aged man said in a low voice. Hu Tianfang shook his head. "If you can feel it, how is it a divine sword? Its aura is completely restrained, and it does not give off any sense of danger. It is formless and has no aura, and there is no way to avoid it. If that's the case, isn't it invincible?" The gloomy middle-aged man said, unconvinced. Hu Tianfang said, "Without enough skills, you can't activate the divine light sword at all. If you are prepared, there is nothing to be afraid of." Everyone nodded. "We also don't know where it is," the gloomy middle-aged man said slowly. "This time, we have mobilized so many people. If we don't get it, then we are really unlucky. We have split into 9 groups, and one of them will definitely get the news." Hu Tianfang waved his hand. "When the time comes, we will work together. No one can escape from us. I'm just afraid of the 9 tribes interfering," the gloomy middle-aged man scoffed. "They are all despicable and shameless people. I fear the heaven-shaking tower the most." Hu Tianfang frowned. "If the heaven-shaking tower really makes a move, I'm afraid," everyone cursed in a low voice. D*MN the 9 tribes? Chu Li sat at the peak of the mountain and observed their actions. He frowned and pondered. It seemed that they had not obtained the divine light sword, and there was no news about it either. They had not found any traces of the divine light sword. If that was the case, it would be troublesome. They might not even be able to find the divine light sword in the end. Once the heaven-shaking tower made a move, they might not even wait for the city of 10,000 swords to receive the news. They would have already returned with the divine light sword. He had to think of another way. He sat at the peak of the mountain and pondered for a while. Then, he tried to extrapolate again, but there were no clues. He was at a loss. Sure enough, someone had used a treasure to conceal the divine light sword's heavenly design. It was probably the heaven-shaking tower's doing. Hee. A delicate laugh suddenly rang out. It was like the ringing of a silver bell in the sky, lingering in the surroundings and echoing through the forest. Chu Li was slightly shocked. The person who laughed had a profound cultivation level, which made him slightly afraid. The expressions of Hu Tianfang and the others changed slightly. They quickly got up and gathered together to form a sword formation. They held their swords and scanned their surroundings. Their bodies were tense, and they could tell that the woman who laughed had a profound cultivation level. The sky suddenly flashed, and 3 women in snow-white clothes appeared. Their loose white robes covered their bodies, and their faces were covered by a white veil. Only 3 pairs of bright eyes could be seen as they stepped into the void and looked down at the 6 people below. Chu Li's expression changed slightly. Although the 3 women were dressed in snow-white clothes and had white veils covering their faces, Chu Li could recognize 2 of them at a glance. They were his wife, Shao Qi, and son Mingyue. He had thought that Taihao Peak might make a move, but he did not think that Taihao Peak would send Shao Qi and son Mingyue. After all, they had only been up the mountain for a short period of time. The three women looked down coldly. Chapter 2161. The six expressions changed slightly. Hu Tianfang said in a low voice, "Hand over what?" The petite girl snorted softly and said, "The sword you were holding earlier." "What do you want our swords for?" Hu Tianfang frowned and waved the long sword in his hand. "Although this sword is sharp, it is not a famous sword. I really don't know what you want it for. I haven't asked who you are." The gloomy middle-aged man had already secretly crushed a jade talisman, notifying the other experts of the city of 10,000 swords to come and help. The cultivation of these three white-clothed women was astonishing. The six of them could not stop them. Moreover, two of the three sword-forging hall experts had not even reached the second rank. "Humph, you people of the city of 10,000 swords are becoming more and more arrogant." The petite girl shook her head and said, "Do you think you can challenge the 9 divisions and challenge our Great Sky Peak?" Great Sky Peak. Hu Tianfang's expression changed slightly, and he said in a low voice, "Don't joke around. Why would Great Sky Peak steal our swords? Who dares to pretend to be Great Sky Peak?" The petite girl snorted softly and said indifferently, "Don't use words to stop us. What's wrong with stealing your swords? You have bad intentions, so you should steal." "Miss, aren't your words a bit wrong?" Hu Tianfang revealed a puzzled expression. He frowned and said in a low voice, "We are sitting here eating. Everything is fine. Why do you have bad intentions? Disaster really does fall from the sky. Your Great Sky Peak is strong, but you can't bully others like this, right?" The petite girl pointed at the sword on his back and snorted. "Who can't see through your little tricks? You are using this sword to pretend to be the divine light sword to muddy the waters, right?" "That's right," Hu Tianfang admitted calmly. "If we obtained the divine light sword, we would use this sword to pretend to be the real one. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with a cicada shedding its carapace, right?" The petite girl froze and looked Hu Tianfang up and down. She nodded and said, "You have some spirit and dare to take responsibility for your actions. Out of respect for you, I won't kill you. Hand over the sword and you can leave." "Impossible." Hu Tianfang shook his head. "This is a divine weapon that I have painstakingly forged. Even if it is not as good as the divine light sword, it is still a divine weapon. If you obediently hand it over to me, I will not be able to get over the hurdle in my heart." Hee, you're quite ambitious. Alright, come over here. If you can survive 10 moves, I'll let this sword go." The petite lady in white waved her jade-like hand and said lazily, "If you can't block 10 moves, hand over your sword obediently. Do you agree?" "Alright." Hu Tianfang glanced at the 5 people around him, and said in a deep voice. The gloomy middle-aged man hurriedly said, "Hall Master Hu, you can't." Since this woman dared to say such a thing, she was naturally confident. If she could not withstand 10 moves, she would have to hand over the sword. This sword was of great importance. Once she obtained the real divine light sword, this sword would attract a lot of attention, thus ensuring that the divine light sword returned to the city of 10,000 swords. He had already crushed the jade talisman, and everyone was already on their way here. As long as he could stall for time, the experts from the city of 10,000 swords would arrive. No matter how strong these 3 women were, they would not be able to stop the hundreds of experts from the city of 10,000 swords. Hu Tianfang waved his hand and said, "Let me do it. I don't believe I can't even last 10 moves." "Hall Master Hu, please reconsider," the gloomy middle-aged man said. Hu Tianfang shook his head and strode out of the sword formation. When he arrived in front of the 3 women, he raised his head and shouted, "Come, I've long wanted to experience the antique study of Taihao Peak. I want to see how they're stronger than us. As you wish. The petite lady flashed in the air, and appeared 3 meters away from Hu Tianfang in the next moment. Her clear eyes sized him up a few times. Make your move. Take this. Hu Tianfang said in a deep voice. He pulled out the fake divine light sword and gently stabbed it at the petite lady. Swoosh. With a whistling sound, the tip of the sword instantly reached the woman's chest. The sword's momentum was as fast as a stream of light. Chu Li, who was sitting on the peak, could see through Hu Tianfang's thoughts. He sighed to himself that Hu Tianfang was indeed a man who looked rough on the outside but was actually very meticulous on the inside. Once the experts from the city of 10,000 swords arrived, they would certainly be able to surround the 3 women from Taihao Peak. But what would happen after that? Would they kill them or let them go? If they killed the 3 women, Taihao Peak would definitely annihilate the city of 10,000 swords. If they let the 3 women go, the city of 10,000 swords would lose all face. It would be better for him to challenge them alone. If he won, he would be happy to keep the fake divine light sword. If he lost, it would be nothing. Losing to a top-notch expert from Taihao Peak was not a shameful thing. Losing face for himself was better than losing to the city of 10,000 swords. As for the divine light sword, it had already been lost when Taihao Peak had set their eyes on it. There was no way to keep it. It would be the same even if he obtained the divine light sword. Unless he sent it to the city of 10,000 swords before they could react and use the sex protective array to block them, he would not be able to snatch it away from Taihao Peak. However, the gloomy middle-aged man thought differently. He felt that once this fake divine light sword was snatched away, he would lose the chance to obtain the divine light sword. Even if he obtained the real divine light sword, without the fake sword to attract attention and divert attention, he would not be able to keep it and send it to the city of 10,000 swords. Therefore, he wanted to protect the fake divine light sword at all costs. Unfortunately, Hu Tianfang did not listen to him. He could only watch helplessly as the petite woman flicked Hu Tianfang's long sword away and flew out of his hand. The petite woman grabbed the fake divine light sword in the air and then appeared in front of Hu Tianfang in a flash. The tip of the sword was already pressed against his throat. No matter how his body moved, the tip of the sword was still pressed against his throat. It was so cold that it felt as if the sword had pierced through his throat. Chu Li narrowed his eyes and frowned. This petite woman's cultivation level was truly shocking. Even though he had reached his current level, he was still no match for her. The seemingly light flick probably contained an extremely tyrannical force. Otherwise, with Hu Tianfang's divine power, how could he let the long sword fly out of his hand? The speed of her body movement technique was beyond imagination. Hu Tianfang did not have a chance to dodge at all. It seemed like Hu Tianfang had been constantly dodging, but in reality, he had been bound by an invisible force. It was like the heavenly demonic universe lock had locked him in place, preventing him from breaking through the void. How is it? The petite woman gently withdrew the long sword. After looking at it for a while, she slowly nodded and said, "It's a good sword indeed. As expected of the clan leader of the sword forging hall in the city of 10,000 swords. Your technique is not bad. Thank you for the compliment." Hu Tianfang fist saluted. The petite woman said, "All right, I'll let you go this time." Hu Tianfang hurriedly called out, "I haven't asked for your name, miss." "Oh, you want to take revenge?" The petite woman scoffed and said, "I'm not going to tell you." Hu Tianfang smiled bitterly and said, "Could it be that you're afraid that I'll really be able to take revenge? There's no use goading me. I'm not going to tell you." The petite woman chuckled and said, "Just give up. With your aptitude, you're no match for me even if you train for 1,000 years. Junior sister Xiao, junior sister Sun, let's go." "Yes, senior sister." The 2 women stood nearby and watched the battle. At that moment they fist saluted and responded. Hu Tianfang sighed and shook his head dejectedly. He helplessly watched as the three women fluttered up into the sky like three white clouds and slowly disappeared into the distance. Sigh. The gloomy middle-aged man shook his head. Clan leader Hu, we should have waited. A long night is fraught with dreams. Hu Tianfang sighed and said, Our luck is really bad. We encountered Tai Hao Peak as soon as we arrived. What do we do now? The gloomy middle-aged man said helplessly, Without the fake divine light sword, we have no chance. Chapter 2162. Seeing his smile, everyone felt that it was strange and looked at him in confusion. Hu Tianfang chuckled and shook his head. The gloomy middle-aged man felt that he was too agitated and lost his mind. He quickly said, Hall Chief Hu, it's not a big deal to lose to that woman. She's a disciple of Tai Hao Peak. How could we beat her? I just feel that Hall Chief Hu is too irrational. How could you agree when you know you can't beat her? So what if I don't agree? Hu Tianfang's smile faded and he sighed. I wasn't convinced at first. I can't beat her, but I can at least take 10 moves. I'm a first rank after all. Everyone nodded. Hu Tianfang was a top-notch expert in the city of 10,000 swords. Otherwise, he would not have become a hall chief. Even if the sword forging hall was only a place to forge swords, a hall chief needed to have enough martial arts to suppress everyone. No matter how good the sword was, if one's martial arts were not good enough, it would be difficult to convince everyone to become a hall chief. Tai Hao Peak's martial arts were strong, and Tai Hao Peak's experts were powerful, far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. However, Hu Tianfang, a top-notch first-rank expert, could not even take 10 moves from such a delicate woman. He could not help but feel somewhat unconvinced. In the end, it gave them a fierce slap to wake them up. Tai Hao Peak was Tai Hao Peak. Regardless of age, regardless of male or female, they weren't people they could compare to. Hu Tianfang scoffed. I didn't expect you to block it. Amazing. Now that we've lost the fake divine light sword, we can't keep the real one. The gloomy middle-aged man sighed and said, Hall Master Hu, this is not a small crime. When we return, the city lord will definitely punish you, so you shouldn't have agreed. When everyone is here, if the divine lightsaber is lost, you won't be held responsible. Hall Master Hu, you are too honest. Haha, I'm honest? Hu Tianfang laughed and shook his head. Actually, it's not that hard to take back the sword. What can we do? The gloomy middle-aged man asked. Hu Tianfang said, I forged that sword and it contains my blood essence. I can sense its location. As long as there are enough experts, we can take it back, but, yes, we have to take it back, the gloomy middle-aged man said. We can cover our faces and refuse to admit it. Hu Tianfang shook his head and said, There's no need for us to rob them. Then who is going to snatch it? The gloomy middle-aged man frowned. This sword is too important. Hu Tianfang smiled and said, Now, we will have to wait for news from our brothers to see if we can find the real divine light sword. If we can find the real one, then we will spread the news that Great Sky Peak has obtained the divine light sword. Let everyone snatch the fake one, and we will snatch the real one. I'm afraid it won't work. The gloomy middle-aged man shook his head and said, No one dares to rob Great Heaven Peak. That might not be the case. Hu Tianfang said, If we dare to rob them, why wouldn't others? The divine light sword is no ordinary sword. Everyone nodded. Under the temptation of the divine light sword, it was very easy for them to take the risk out of desperation. Who cared about the Great Sky Peak's heaven-shaking tower? Hu Tianfang smiled and stretched out his hand. Old Zhu. Zhu Lingying took a step forward, unsheathed the long sword at his waist, and offered it with both hands. Hu Tianfang took the long sword and gently pulled it out. The blade was snow-white and flawless, as if moonlight shone on it. The cold aura instantly lowered the surrounding temperature, and everyone's gazes were involuntarily drawn in. Ha ha! Hu Tianfang waved it lightly, and cold air spread everywhere. Everyone's expression changed. Divine light sword! The gloomy middle-aged man cried out involuntarily. Hu Tianfang said proudly, "How is it? Hall Master Hu?" The gloomy middle-aged man laughed loudly, shook his head, and said, "As the saying goes, as the righteous rises 1 foot, the evil rises 10. You really are something." The other 2 middle-aged men had not said much, but now they could not help but speak up. "Just how many fake divine light swords are there?" Hu Tianfang looked at another sword-forging hall disciple. Old Meng. The last silent middle-aged man pulled out the long sword at his waist. It was also snow-white, as if moonlight had gathered on it. It was the same as the long sword in Hu Tianfang's hand, and the 3 swords that had been stolen by the 3 great Sky Peak women. 3. Everyone shook their heads and laughed. The gloomy middle-aged man shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "As expected of Hall Master Hu, I am impressed." Impressed. He realized that he had really underestimated Hu Tianfang. It was not by luck that he became a hall master. His martial arts and wisdom were superior, yet he had worried for him. He was a laughing stock, and just thinking about it made him blush. Hu Tianfang smiled. "I didn't hide it from everyone on purpose. If everyone knew, I definitely couldn't hide it from the masters of Great Sky Peak." The intelligence of the Great Sky Peak disciples was beyond imagination. In order to make it look real, he could only hide it from everyone else. Otherwise, he would be seen through, and all the swords would be taken away. Everyone else nodded, understanding his concerns. "Sigh. It's good this time." The gloomy middle-aged man sighed. "That really scared me just now. I almost gave up." He quickly took out another jade talisman and crushed it, telling the masters of 10,000 Swords City not to rush over. The danger had been resolved, and if they rushed over, they would only expose their whereabouts and delay the important matter. Hu Tianfang smiled. "Our martial arts are the weakest. How can we not be prepared at all? Now we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. With Great Sky Peak helping us to attract attention, it'll be much easier for us to succeed." Hall Master Hu is really good. Everyone was impressed. Chu Li smiled and shook his head as he sat on the mountain peak. It was true that the saying, "the devil is 10 feet higher," was true, but unfortunately, it was not what they thought. "It's really good." A sweet laughter suddenly rang out, and it was like a silver bell vibrating in the air, resounding through the entire mountain range. Hu Tianfang and the others' expressions changed. They immediately knew that it was the petite woman from before. As they watched in astonishment, Shao Qi and the other 2 ladies appeared out of thin air again. They stood in the air and looked down at the 6 of them. 3 pairs of clear eyes seemed to be smiling as if they were laughing at their stupidity. The gloomy middle-aged man's expression changed, and he secretly scolded himself for being too careless. He first crushed the help talisman, then the safety talisman. He could not possibly crush the help talisman again, and it was too late. The petite woman shook her head and chuckled. "You're really cunning. As expected of the city of 10,000 swords. Hand it over." Hu Tianfang returned the swords to their scabbards, then extended his hand to let Elder Meng take the swords. He tossed the 2 swords forward and said calmly, "I'm impressed." The petite woman reached out and caught the 2 swords. They swung in the air and shot toward Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue respectively. The 2 women took the swords. Sun Mingyue said faintly, "The scabbard." Elder Meng glanced at Hu Tianfang and took the scabbard from his waist. He threw it forcefully into the air, as if it was shooting toward the clouds. Sun Mingyue reached out her hand and gently waved. The scabbard that was shooting toward the sky suddenly drew a half-arc and floated toward her, gently falling into her hand. She returned the swords to the scabbard and nodded in satisfaction. The petite woman withdrew her gaze and nodded in satisfaction. She chuckled. Only the 6 of you know that I've obtained the fake divine lightsaber. If the news gets out, I'll come looking for you. Even if I have to hide in the city of 10,000 swords, I'll definitely kill you. Understood? Hu Tianfang said in a deep voice. We'll keep our mouths shut. Good, that's more like it. The petite woman smiled. I'm starting to admire you. Thank you. Hu Tianfang gave a fist salute. There was no sign of surprise or anger. Chapter 2163. The 3 women disappeared into thin air like phantoms. The 6 of them stood there in silence, as if they were afraid that they would return. The 3 women's methods had already frightened them. After a while, Hu Tianfang shook his head and smiled bitterly. As expected of Tai Hao Peak. The gloomy middle-aged man said slowly, Clan leader Hu, we've really failed this time. All our plans have been for naught. We're not fated with the divine lightsaber anymore. Hu Tianfang glanced around and said, It's not that easy. I've cultivated 4 swords in total. Other than these 3, the governor has 1 more. We're not capable enough to keep it, but the governor has no problem. The governor has 1 too? The gloomy middle-aged man was overjoyed. Hu Tianfang said slowly, How could the governor not have predicted this? Let's see if they can snatch the governor's sword. The gloomy middle-aged man said fiercely. He felt extremely aggrieved. As a man, he was actually pressed down by 3 women to the point he couldn't catch his breath. Even though these 3 women were disciples of Sky High Peak, he still felt he couldn't endure it and was depressed to the point he wanted to shout and scream. Hu Tianfang sighed. Let's go, we'll meet up with the governor. All right. The gloomy middle-aged man scoffed. Chu Li sat at the peak and shook his head and laughed as he watched their dejected faces. He had a preliminary understanding of Tai Hao Peak's methods. As expected of Tai Hao Peak, not only were they outstanding in martial arts, but their minds were also extraordinary. He could not see the face of the petite woman earlier because the white veil on her face was unusual. She also had a treasure that blocked the omniscient mirror's prying. However, he could tell from the aura that she revealed that her cultivation level was shocking and that he was no match for her. This was only the disciples of this generation. If it was the previous generation, it seemed like he was still far from being able to dominate the outer heavens realm. The divine lightsaber was not that easy to snatch. Since Tai Hao Peak had already made a move, the heaven-shaking pavilion would definitely not stand idly by. He did not see Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue because this was a critical moment. Although the 2 women had already sensed his presence, they did not react. It was obvious that they guessed that he was trying to fish in troubled waters. He did not want his senior sister to see through him, so he pretended not to know. It would not be too late to meet them later. Chu Li continued to sit at the peak of the mountain and observed their thoughts with the omniscient mirror from 10 miles away. The 6 of them sat down again, but they were listless. They stared at the bonfire absent-mindedly, not saying a word. Chu Li saw that Zhu Lungying was also frowning with his head lowered and a worried look on his face. He couldn't help but laugh inwardly. It seemed that Zhu Lungying had completely assimilated into his identity as a disciple of the City of 10,000 Swords. It had already become a habit, and he wouldn't reveal any flaws. Hu Tianfang suddenly spoke and snorted, Motherf **Ker, it really isn't that simple. This time we have to be careful. Don't fail to snatch the divine light sword and end up dying inside. It looks like we didn't pay enough attention and thought too simply. Yes. The gloomy middle-aged man nodded slowly. City of 10,000 Swords? Suddenly, a soft shout came from the void. Everyone hurriedly looked up and saw 4 young men standing in the air 10 meters away. The young man in the lead was wearing a loose purple robe. He was tall and skinny, as if he could fly away with the wind at any time. Hu Tianfang and the others got up and set up the sword formation. Hu Tianfang cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, May I know who the 4 young masters are? You're from the city of 10,000 swords, right? The young man in the lead was handsome and arrogant. He stood in the void with his hands behind his back and said slowly, "Was it a disciple of Tai Hao Peak who came here just now?" "That's right," Hu Tianfang said in a deep voice. He could feel the aura of the 4 of them like a mountain, pressuring him so much that he could not breathe. Although he felt aggrieved, these people did not take them seriously at all and did not even bother to reveal their names. He could only endure it. However, Chu Li recognized this young man. He was also an old friend of his, Zhao Haiyuan. Zhao Haiyuan frowned and said, "What did they come here for?" "They just taught us a lesson," Hu Tianfang said. He resisted the temptation and did not tell them the truth, lest the petite woman came to settle the score with him later. The disciples of Tai Hao Peak would do what they said. If he really told these 4 young men, his life would be in danger. "That's not right." Zhao Haiyuan shook his head with his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Tell the truth, lest you suffer. They didn't just teach you a lesson. They must have taken something, right?" "This." Hu Tianfang sighed and said, "We can't tell you." It was the people of Tai Hao Peak who threatened you," Zhao Haiyuan said calmly. "All right then, let me guess. They took your swords?" Hu Tianfang was stunned and did not say a word. Zhao Haiyuan scoffed and said, "It's fake divine light swords, isn't it?" Hu Tianfang looked at him in shock. Zhao Haiyuan said, "The city of 10,000 swords is really something. This time, the world is really going to be in chaos." Hu Tianfang hurriedly said, "You guessed it, not me. May I know your name, young master?" "Zhao Haiyuan of the heaven-shaking pavilion." Zhao Haiyuan said slowly, "How many fake swords did the city of 10,000 swords forge?" "This." Hu Tianfang hesitated. Zhao Haiyuan said calmly, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hu Tianfang shook his head without saying a word. Zhao Haiyuan said, "Looks like it's 5. They really want to see the world in chaos. The 6 of you, inform Castellan Gua and tell him to back off. Don't get involved in this matter." Hu Tianfang shook his head and said, "We can't make the decision for the governor." Zhao Haiyuan said calmly, "This matter is not simple. It's the Azura realm's conspiracy." "Is there no divine light swords?" Hu Tianfang was stunned and quickly said, "We've all been fooled. There is a divine light sword." Zhao Haiyuan said, "But it's not in the Grand Master's realm, it's in the heavenly demon realm. Are you going to look for it in the heavenly demon realm?" Hu Tianfang shook his head and laughed. "That's impossible. Someone has clearly seen the divine light sword. That one is also fake. It's a fake sword made by the Azura," Zhao Haiyuan said calmly. "Tell Governor Guor about this so that he won't waste his effort." "Then, Great Heaven Peak is also fooled?" Hu Tianfang was still skeptical. Zhao Haiyuan raised an eyebrow and said impatiently, "Great Heaven Peak doesn't know either." Hu Tianfang laughed and was overjoyed. "Haha, Great Heaven Peak is really fooled?" "Yes," Zhao Haiyuan said, "they're just slightly more skilled in martial arts. It's not surprising that they were fooled." "That's right." Hu Tianfang laughed. "Didn't you tell Great Heaven Peak?" Zhao Haiyuan said, "You don't have to worry about that. Bring the letter to Governor Guo." "Yes," Hu Tianfang fist saluted. Zhao Haiyuan and the 3 young men suddenly disappeared. Hu Tianfang and the others looked at each other and couldn't help but show doubtful expressions. They began to discuss. "Is this news true or not? The people from the heaven-shaking pavilion won't lie. That's hard to say. If they're tempted, they can just tell everyone to leave and take the divine light sword for themselves. There's no need to go through so much trouble. They can deduce the location of the divine light sword. We can just go and find it. If it's that easy, we wouldn't even be here." Hu Tianfang shook his head slowly. "The divine light sword's location can't be deduced. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called a divine sword. Then, are we really going to find the governor? That's the only way." Sigh. How depressing! How frustrating! Zhu Lungying sighed. Chapter 2164. Chu Li frowned as he pondered. He hated Zhao Haiyuan and could not stand it, but he felt that Zhao Haiyuan would not lie, so he must be telling the truth. If the divine light sword was a plot by Azura, then one should not underestimate Azura's methods. People always thought that Azura only knew how to kill and not plot, but it was an illusion. There were many wise people among Azura who were good at scheming. This divine light sword could exacerbate the conflict between the Grand Master and heavenly demonic realms, deepen their hatred, and even incite a war between the two realms. Once the fake divine light sword caused a bloodbath, and then the news that the divine light sword was in the heavenly demon realm was released. The people who had gone berserk would probably run straight to the heavenly demon realm. Furthermore, the heavenly demon realm forbade people from the beyond heavens realm from entering. If that was the case, there would definitely be a huge battle. In the end, the two realms would be in an irreconcilable state, and the Azura realm would be able to reap the benefit. It was truly a good plan. Chu Li sighed and shook his head. He could not underestimate anyone because they were all smarter than the other. If he did not have the omniscient mirror, he might not be their match and would only be fooled by them. Hu Tianfang and the others fell silent again, and could not help but feel disheartened. They thought highly of themselves and thought that the City of Thousand Swords was similar to the 9 divisions, but their circumstances were different, so people looked down on the City of Thousand Swords. Now that they encountered Taihao Peak and Heaven-Shaking Pavilion, it was an eye-opener for them. They knew that they had underestimated the 9 divisions. They were indeed the top forces with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. The City of Thousand Swords could not compare. Let's go look for the governor. Without the divine light sword, there's no point in staying here, Hu Tianfang said. Everyone nodded. They stood up and extinguished the bonfire. Then, their figures swayed and disappeared from where they stood. Chu Li pondered. The next moment, he revealed his original appearance. Shao Qi, Sun Mingyue, and the petite lady were sitting at the peak of a mountain. They were chatting and laughing, looking very relaxed. Chu Li's sudden appearance caused the petite woman to turn her head. Her bright eyes were like the ripples on the surface of a lake. They rippled for a moment before they disappeared and returned to normal. She only looked at Chu Li with interest. Chu Li fist saluted and smiled. Madam Mingyue. Shao Qi nodded gently. Sun Mingyue chuckled. Why did you suddenly come over? The two women had an extraordinary connection with him, so they knew that he had appeared before and was right beside them, so they weren't too surprised. Chu Li smiled. I'm here to watch the fun. Have you come out from your isolated cultivation? Shao Qi asked softly. Chu Li nodded. If he had met Shao Qi alone, he would have gone forward to hold her hand and pull her into his arms. It was as if he was hugging a warm, fragrant, and soft jade. Watching her blush like a fairy was a great pleasure. At this moment, he could only endure it. He did not go forward to be intimate with her, and only looked at her with a smile. Sun Mingyue snorted and said nothing. Shao Qi turned around and said, Senior Sister Fu, this is my husband Chu Li. Then, she whispered to Chu Li, Senior Sister Fu Kaiwei has always taken good care of us. She glanced at Sun Mingyue as she spoke. Sun Mingyue nodded. It's all thanks to Senior Sister Fu's care that we can be so free and unfettered. Chu Li. Fu Kaiwei nodded. You're really famous, you really live up to your reputation. Chu Li's aura was restrained and did not leak out at all. It was obvious that his cultivation level was shockingly pure, or else his aura would be as turbulent as the mountains and the sea. It was easy to release one's aura but difficult to restrain it. It was a matter of purity. The purer one's cultivation level was, the more one could control it at will, the harder it was to restrain it completely. The more one's aura was released, the more difficult it was to control it at will. It was rough but limited, and once a fight broke out, it would be easy to be at a disadvantage. Just a trace of his almost completely restrained aura was revealed, and she felt a soul-stirring feeling. The depth of his cultivation was not inferior to hers, and it might even be a level higher. It made her body tense up, and her hair stood on end. Her intuition warned her of danger. Chuli gave a fist salute and smiled. "Thank you, Senior Sister Fu. You flatter me." Fu Kaiwei waved her hand. "I hit it off with them, and it's rare to find people who hit it off with each other. Are you here to watch the fun, or do you want to fight for the Divine Light Sword too?" Chu Li shook his head. "I heard from Zhao Haiyuan that the Divine Light Sword is in the heavenly demonic realm. It's a scam by Azura, and it caused everyone to kill each other." Fu Kaiwei frowned. Chu Li looked at Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue. The two women stared at him with their sparkling eyes, but they were wary of each other and did not take the initiative to speak. Chu Li felt awkward too. It was not easy to get along with the two women together, and he had to be careful not to hurt either of them. The other three were not happy, so he should be alone. "Chu Li, what do you think?" Fu Kaiwei asked with a frown. Chu Li said, "Actually, I think Senior Sister Fu should ask the Heaven-Swaying Pavilion. I'm sure they won't lie." "Alright, I want to get to the bottom of this." Fu Kaiwei scoffed. "Junior Sister Xiao, Junior Sister Sun, stay." Sun Mingyue quickly said, "I'll go with you, Senior Sister. Let Junior Sister Xiao stay." "Alright." Fu Kaiwei's bright eyes turned to Chu Li, then she chuckled and disappeared. Sun Mingyue glared at him and disappeared as well. Shao Qi shook her head. "The Divine Light Sword." Chu Li smiled. "I heard that the Divine Light Sword is powerful. You're tempted too?" Shao Qi asked softly. Chu Li reached out and pulled her into his arms. He hugged her warm and soft body tightly. His heart was calm as he sighed. "I wanted to see it, but I didn't expect it to be a scam." He felt that his heavenly star insight was not strong enough. From this point of view, it was still inferior to the heaven-swaying pavilion. Not to mention himself, the entire Outland had been deceived by Azura and had been fooled by him. Many people had probably been killed because of a fake sword. Shao Qi asked, "Do you want to enter the heavenly demonic realm?" Chu Li sighed. "I want to look for it." Shao Qi nodded and leaned against his chest. She whispered, "The Divine Light Sword is very dangerous." Chu Li smiled. "Your husband has encountered many dangers, but it's like walking on flat ground. Don't worry." Shao Qi hugged his waist tightly without saying a word. She enjoyed the moment of peace and joy. Chu Li stood at the peak of a mountain and looked down at the mountains. He held a jade pendant in his hand. It was Zhu Lingying's jade pendant. Through the observation of the omniscient mirror, Zhu Lingying's group of 6 had gathered with 10 middle-aged men. They were sitting in a forest to rest as they talked about their previous experiences. Hu Tianfang and the others talked about their encounter with the Tai Hao Peak and the Heaven-Shaking Tower, while the other 10 middle-aged men talked about their encounter with the Masters from the Snowy Mountain. They experienced a battle and managed to repel those people. One of the middle-aged men patted the long sword on his waist and sighed. "Luckily we brought this peerless sword, or we wouldn't have been able to deal with the Masters from the Great Snow Mountain. Their martial arts are very strange." He wore a purple robe and had a strong build. His thick eyebrows and big eyes exuded a masculine aura. He looked bold and bold. Another handsome middle-aged man nodded. "The inner energy of the Great Snow Mountain is firm and yang, but it also carries a strange chill. It's really strange. We almost suffered a great loss. This time, we'll be visiting all the major sects in the world. I'm afraid some of the smaller sects will jump out too. It's been a long time since it's been so lively. I don't care if they're from the Great Snow Mountain or the other sections. If they encounter my peerless sword, they won't be able to return." The purple-robed man laughed. Chapter 2165. His words caused everyone's expression to change. The 10 middle-aged men did not feel anything, but the 5 people beside Hu Tianfang had ugly expressions. It was obvious that they felt uneasy just thinking about it. The purple-robed middle-aged man laughed. "Brother Hu, you've become timid. Even if a Taihao Peak master comes, with my unparalleled sword, he'll definitely return in defeat." Sigh. Hu Tianfang shook his head. "It's not that simple. The Taihao Peak masters aren't as weak as we thought. They're stronger than we thought." "Brother Hu, aren't you exaggerating?" The purple-robed middle-aged man chuckled. "Then I'd really like to experience the antique study of Taihao Peak." Hu Tianfang's expression changed slightly and he quickly waved his hand. "Brother Chao, be careful with your words." The purple-robed middle-aged man said with a smile, "Senior brother Hu, once bitten, twice shy. Although the great heaven peak is strong, it isn't so invincible, right? If I'm still not a match for them with the peerless sword, then I'll be sincerely convinced." Sigh. Hu Tianfang shook his head and gave up on persuading him. If he had not experienced it himself, he would not believe that the masters of Taihao Peak were so powerful. "Master of Taihao Peak, please show yourself." The purple-robed middle-aged man fist saluted and laughed. "I'll personally experience the antique study of Taihao Peak." As soon as he said that, Hu Tianfang's expression changed. He wanted to step forward and cover his mouth. Unfortunately, the words had already left his mouth. He looked around and only hoped that no Taihao Peak masters would appear. As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings became silent. The rest of the people were also shocked by the purple-robed middle-aged man. They were worried that a Taihao Peak master would really appear. "Ha ha!" The purple-robed elder suddenly laughed. "How about it, Brother Hu? It's not that exaggerated. Just relax, don't be so scared." Sigh. "All right." Hu Tianfang shook his head. He was originally so high-spirited, but now he knew that he was just a frog in a well. There was no prestige to speak of, and he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Everyone around them laughed, except for the 5 people beside Hu Tianfang. Chu Li suddenly appeared beside the purple-robed middle-aged man. Then both of them disappeared. "Brother Chao!" Everyone shouted and turned their heads to look around. However, the surroundings were empty and they could not see anything. The purple-robed middle-aged man had completely disappeared. The next moment Chu Li appeared in a cave. The purple-robed middle-aged man beside him had already fainted. With 2 light claps of his hands, the purple-robed man's cultivation base was crippled and all of his belongings were taken. Then, with a flash, he disappeared, reappearing at the top of a mountain 50 kilometers away. After putting down the items, he returned to the cave. Chu Li woke the purple-robed man up. His face had turned into that of a mediocre middle-aged man. He calmly sat in front of the purple-robed middle-aged man, calmly looking down at him. The purple-robed middle-aged man suddenly opened his eyes as he lay on the grass pile in the cave. He wanted to struggle but realized that he could not move at all. His body was limp and powerless. He could only widen his eyes and stare at Chu Li. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Who are you?" Chu Li asked, "You're holding the peerless sword, right?" The violet-robed middle-aged man frowned and said, "It's an expert of Great Dawn Peak?" Chu Li shook his head. "I'm not a disciple of Taihao Peak. I've heard about your arrogant words. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Let's talk about the sword technique of the peerless sword first." "Impossible," the purple-robed middle-aged man said lightly. "It's useless even if you have the unparalleled sword. Only the mental cultivation method of the City of 10,000 Swords can activate the unparalleled sword's sword technique." Chu Li said, "You don't have to worry about that. Tell me about it." "You should just kill me. I'll rather die than hand over the unparalleled sword technique," the purple-robed middle-aged man said slowly. Chu Li smiled. "I heard that the 9 swords can be combined into one." "How?" The purple-robed, middle-aged man smiled mockingly. You want to combine the 9 swords? Do you want to do something that the city of 10,000 swords can't do? Why not? Chu Li smiled. The purple-robed, middle-aged man said, Then you have to defeat Chu Li first. Chu Li said, Chu Li is not a big deal. With my cultivation level, I can't defeat him? You can't, the purple-robed, middle-aged man said coldly. Chu Li had already read the situation of combining the 9 swords into one from his mind. When the 9 swords were put together, as long as a set of general sword technique was activated, the 9 swords would float in the air and turn into a sword wheel. Wherever it passed, the void could be broken, nothing could stop it, and no one could escape. It was almost invincible. Chu Li frowned. If that was the case, even if he obtained the 9 swords, he could only obtain the general sword technique from the governor of the city of 10,000 swords, Guapairu. The difficulty was not small. However, knowing the method was better than not knowing anything. He just had to think of a way slowly. Chu Li sighed. All right, let's talk about the unparalleled sword technique first. Actually, the unparalleled sword technique is not that difficult. I know a little about it. Do you agree? As he spoke, he began to recite a section of the sword technique to activate the heart technique. This was actually what he had read from the mind of the purple-robed, middle-aged man. As soon as he finished speaking, the mind of the purple-robed, middle-aged man subconsciously thought of the following heart incantation. Therefore, Chu Li slowly recited the complete heart incantation. He even recited the last part of the most crucial secret technique. How is it? After Chu Li finished reciting, he looked at the purple-robed, middle-aged man with satisfaction. The purple-robed, middle-aged man's face turned pale. He stared at Chu Li in disbelief. Who are you? Chu Li smiled. It's better if you don't know, or else your life will be in danger. The purple-robed, middle-aged man stared at him in shock. He glanced at the unparalleled sword at Chu Li's waist and said slowly, I hope you don't disgrace this sword. Chu Li said, How is the power of the unparalleled sword compared to the other 8 swords? About the same, the purple-robed, middle-aged man said. Chu Li shook his head. You're still in the mood to lie at a time like this. You're really brave. From the purple-robed, middle-aged man's mind, he knew that the power of the 9 swords were not the same. They also focused on different aspects. The unparalleled sword was powerful in its speed. It was known as the unparalleled speed. When the sword was drawn, the body of the sword would increase the speed of the sword. This was the uniqueness of this sword. The same technique used the same inner energy. Compared to the unparalleled sword, the speed of the other swords was very different. They would definitely be one step ahead of the others. In a battle between masters, this difference in speed could determine life and death. Chu Li slowly pulled out the sword and lightly flicked it. Ding! A clear sound lingered. He could not help but exclaim, Good sword! The body of the sword was much heavier than the other treasured swords. It was about 3 times heavier. If someone who did not know the unparalleled sword technique wielded this sword, not only would its power not increase, but it would also be greatly reduced. The heavy body of the sword would greatly slow down the speed of the sword. When fighting with others, it would be at a disadvantage. However, with the unparalleled sword technique, the body of the sword suddenly became lighter and the speed of the sword became faster and faster. It was beyond imagination. Chu Li exclaimed again, Good sword! The purple-robed, middle-aged man said, With this sword, you're the enemy of the city of 10,000 swords. The city of 10,000 swords will never let you go. They will definitely hunt you down and kill you. Chu Li shook his head. There are so many people, how can they find me? As long as you have the sword, we will be able to find you. The purple-robed, middle-aged man said, We can use our secret skill to sense the unparalleled sword and find it. You can't hide. Chu Li said thoughtfully, I see. Is there no way to hide? No. The purple-robed, middle-aged man said, Unless you're not in the Outland. Chu Li smiled. Just like the Chu Li of the past, right? That's right. The purple-robed middle-aged man said. Chu Li said, "Thank you for the reminder. Take care." After saying that, he knocked the purple-robed middle-aged man unconscious. He did not kill him, but the spiritual energy from the upper heaven had sealed several of his acupuncture points. Even if someone could wake him up, it would be extremely difficult to unseal these acupuncture points. Chapter 2166. Chu Li threw the purple-robed man into the outer town of the City of Thousand Swords and appeared on a mountainside. There were 6 stone towers built there. The unparalleled sword and sky regicide sword were placed in one of the towers. With the suppression of the formation, the City of Thousand Swords would not be able to sense the 2 swords. It was the most convenient way for him to retrieve them at any time. The next moment, he appeared in his courtyard and laid motionless on his bed. The sun had already set and the afterglow dyed the house dark red. Gu Jiu pushed the door open and handed him a bottle of spirit medicine and a lunchbox. Chu Li smiled. "Senior brother Gu, there's no need for a lunchbox. I can eat outside the town." "How can the food outside compare to ours? The taste is terrible and the ingredients are even worse. Eat these. Then, take the pills. Don't forget to take them." Gu Jiu waved his hand. "Thank you, Senior Brother Gu." Chu Li nodded. "Rest well. Guohuai has realized his mistake and will come to apologize to you. We're from the same faction. Let's turn a blind eye and not be calculative." Gu Jiu smiled. "Yes," Chu Li replied. Gu Jiu smiled in satisfaction. "All right, eat by yourself. I'll come again tomorrow." "Senior Brother Gu, there's no need." Chu Li quickly declined. Gu Jiu waved his hand and left. Chu Li let out a long sigh and opened the lunchbox. There were 6 dishes, 2 soups, and a plate of dessert. It looked, smelled, and tasted great. It was indeed better than the restaurants outside. Chu Li pondered as he ate. Which sword should he snatch next? He had already obtained 3 out of the 9 swords. Although the monarch descends was not with him, he could retrieve it at any time. Of the remaining 6 swords, 3 were guarding the inner town and could not be obtained. There were 3 swords left. One should be with Governor Guobairu while the other 2 were with the 2 top-notch masters. It would not be easy to find them. After eating, he disappeared in a flash and reappeared in the stone tower. He held a sword in each hand and activated the heavenly star insight. After a long while, he suddenly disappeared from the tower with a flash and appeared in a bustling city. After a few turns in an alley, he arrived at a bustling street. His appearance had already changed to the appearance he had when he obtained the unparalleled sword. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at a restaurant. Then, he strolled up to the 2nd floor of the restaurant. He sat in a corner, called over the waiter, and ordered 2 dishes and a jar of wine. As he drank the wine, he listened to the conversation of a table not far from him. As the sun was setting, the restaurant was bustling with activity. The tables were packed with people. Chu Li was able to find an empty table in the corner because the position of the table was too bad. No one was sitting there. Chu Li drank his wine and ate his food calmly, blocking out the noise around him. He could only hear 6 people talking at a table not far from him. The 6 of them were all middle-aged. Their faces were solemn and they didn't say a word. The middle-aged man sitting in the main seat had a flawless, snow-white complexion. It was as if his face was carved out of white jade. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and was extremely handsome. He sat at the table, deep in thought. The other 5 did not speak, as if they were afraid of disturbing his thoughts. After a while, the pale-faced middle-aged man said indifferently, "Let's do it tonight." "All right," the other 5 replied. The pale-faced middle-aged man said softly, "It's going to be a fierce battle. Everyone be prepared." "Brother Xia, don't worry. We know what's important," another middle-aged man said slowly. The pale-faced middle-aged man said, "If this sword is real, we'll have done a great deed. We'll be able to enjoy it for the rest of our lives." The other 5 nodded and smiled. The city of 10,000 swords had a clear distinction between rewards and punishments. If they could really snatch the divine light sword, they would be able to enjoy it for the rest of their lives. The pale-faced middle-aged man said, "But we have to be smart. If the moon frost sword can stop it, then it's fake. There's no need to waste our energy. If the moon frost sword can't stop it, then it's most likely real." The thin middle-aged man opposite him slowly said, "Brother Xia, if the moon frost sword is really damaged, it'll be a huge sin." "It's fine." The pale-faced middle-aged man shook his head. "If we can get the real sword, it'll be worth it even if the moon frost sword is damaged. The mayor won't blame us. We still have to be careful," the thin middle-aged man said. Xia Fei smiled. "All right. I won't do anything unless it's a critical moment." He suddenly froze, and his movements froze. An invisible force drilled into his body from the bottom of his feet, and his body stopped. He wanted to circulate his energy, but he was powerless. It was as if his body did not belong to him. His vision blurred, and an ordinary-looking middle-aged man appeared in front of him. He pulled him up and disappeared. The light was distorted, and he fainted. When he woke up, he found himself lying on a pile of grass in a cave. A middle-aged man was sitting next to him, looking down at him. Chuli realized that this trick of his had always been successful. The 6 of them did not resist, and he had succeeded easily. Then, he slowly questioned them like he did with the purple-robed middle-aged man. He used the omniscient mirror to ask about the moon frost sword technique, then asked about the appearance of the other bleeding sword. Then, he did the same thing and put the other weeping blood sword into his pouch. He quietly and unknowingly obtained the 3 swords. The moon frost sword was extremely keen and cold. It could absorb moonlight, so it was especially powerful at night. Under the moonlight, the body of the sword would absorb the moonlight. After activating the moon frost sword technique, it would become invisible, completely blending into the moonlight. The existence of the sword was almost undetectable. The bleeding sword, on the other hand, would kill upon contact. Once the sword was pierced, it would absorb the opponent's blood essence and continuously replenish the user's energy. Each of the 9 swords had its own advantages, but he felt that the Sky Killer was the most powerful. The other swords were amazing, but they were not as good at killing as the Sky Killer. Unfortunately, the Sky Killer was useless to others. It was powerful, but it burned its lifespan. Lifespan was the most precious thing to a person, so it was best not to use it. The Peerless Sword, Moon Frost Sword, Bleeding Sword, and the Sky Killer were suppressed in the Wheel Pagoda. They were isolated from the city of 10,000 swords' senses and could not be found. He began to recuperate in the city of 10,000 swords. He wandered the streets leisurely while the people of the city of 10,000 swords gradually returned. However, Zhu Lingying, Hu Tianfang, and the others did not return. Chuli used the jade pendant to sense that Zhu Lingying was not in danger. It seemed that the people of the city of 10,000 swords did not completely believe the Heaven Shake Pavilion's words. Unfortunately, without the 9 swords, the city of 10,000 swords was not strong enough. Even if they encountered the Divine Light Sword, they might not be able to snatch it. They just could not accept the fact that they had made a wasted trip and lost 3 swords. One morning, he felt Sun Mingyue's call, so he suddenly appeared at the peak of a mountain. He saw Sun Mingyue in a snow-white robe, standing quietly in the cold wind. Her white robe fluttered, her graceful figure faintly discernible. The white veil on her face was lightly brushed, revealing her jade-like face. When Chuli appeared, she turned to look at him. She took off the white veil, revealing her beautiful face. Her bright eyes glanced at him. "If I didn't call for you, you wouldn't have wanted to see me?" Chuli smiled. Sun Mingyue scoffed. "Don't worry, I called you here for official business. Chu Li showed a puzzled expression. Sun Mingyue said, I received news in the sect that there is a secret skill that can sense the heavenly demon. Chu Li was stunned. He shook his head. There's no such secret skill, right? I heard it's in the boundless surpassing state, Sun Mingyue said. Chu Li frowned and thought about it. He really did not know there was a place called the boundless surpassing state. Sun Mingyue said lightly, the boundless surpassing state is also a branch of Buddhism. It's not in the Grandmaster realm. Chapter 2167. Chu Li frowned at her. Sun Mingyue said, You've never heard of the boundless surpassing state? Chu Li said, Why is there suddenly an boundless surpassing state? Is it not a celestial? Of course it's a celestial, Sun Mingyue said. The disciples of the Holy Church of Light entered the Great Light surpassing state after ascending. What about the Tempest Temple? The Titanium Temple? Chu Li frowned and pondered, then nodded thoughtfully. He really did not care about this. He had been busy and did not carefully analyze each inheritance. Although the Tempest Temple was a top sect in the lower realm, it was not surprising that they were not as good as the Holy Church of Light in the Outland. The boundless surpassing state is the origin of the Tempest Temple. Located in the far west, it's a remote location and has almost nothing to do with other sections. The disciples in the territory almost never come out and cultivate their Buddhist nature in order to become a Buddha. Chu Li nodded slowly. If that's the case, everyone doesn't know much about the boundless surpassing state. Yes. Sun Mingyue nodded. They're not familiar with the martial arts of the boundless surpassing state. It's just that they're cultivating in seclusion, and no one wants to disturb them. It's too far away, so no one goes there. Chu Li sighed. I didn't expect the Tempest Temple's roots to be there. Do they really have a way to sense the heavenly demon? I found an incomplete heart technique in the Taihao Peak Sutra library. It's called the Boundless Light Technique. It's said that one can sense the heavenly demon after successfully cultivating it. Chu Li frowned. The Tempest Temple has a way to defeat the demon, but it requires a monk's sarira. The art of defeating the heavenly demon that we're using now was also obtained from the Boundless Light Technique, Sun Mingyue said. It was derived from the Boundless Light Technique by Great Heaven Peak. Then why didn't Taihao Peak ask for the Boundless Light Technique from the Boundless Surpassing State? Chu Li asked. Sun Mingyue shook her head slowly. According to the Boundless Surpassing State, the Boundless Light Technique is extinct in their surpassing state. Chu Li laughed. What a coincidence. The incomplete Boundless Light Technique was passed down by the Boundless Surpassing State, so you can't say they lied. Also, the Buddhist precepts exist and they won't lie. They're indeed extinct, Sun Mingyue said. Chu Li said, If that's the case, why are you looking for me? He looked at Sun Mingyue in confusion. Sun Mingyue said, I know that your comprehension is astonishing and your attainments in the Dharma are extremely high. I want you to try and see if you can complete the Boundless Light Technique and increase its power. Chu Li shook his head. I can't make up for such a wonderful technique. He was aware of his own limitations. Indeed, his comprehension ability was stronger, and he benefited from the consummation of the scripture of the great wisdom source. However, the boundless light formula must have been comprehended by the great Hao Peak and the other 8 divisions for a long time, and they all wanted to make up for it. He didn't have the confidence to complete a mission that he hadn't been able to complete for many years. You can do it. Sun Mingyue snorted. Their comprehension can't compare to yours. Chu Li smiled. You flatter me, you flatter me. Sun Mingyue glared at him and said, You don't want to help any more. All right, pass me this incomplete technique. I'll give it a try. Chu Li's heart softened when he saw her squinting her eyes and pursing her red lips. He sighed. I've been really busy lately, and I can't afford to be distracted. I can only take it slow. Just keep it in mind. Sun Mingyue said, Listen well, The heavenly demon has no form. Chu Li looked at her seriously. Her words entered his ears and were directly imprinted in his mind. After a while, Sun Mingyue finished reciting. Chu Li closed his eyes slightly as if he was deep in thought. Sun Mingyue remained silent and looked at him quietly. It's really exquisite. Chu Li opened his eyes and nodded. This heart technique is very exquisite and complete. Unfortunately, it's useless without the Saraira of eminent monks. Sun Mingyue said, How many Saraira of eminent monks are there in the world? They're all condensed from one's cultivation level. How can they be given to just anyone? Chu Li said, It's actually very simple. It's best to let these eminent monks guard the border. It's useless. Sun Mingyue shook her head. No one can ask them. What's up with that senior sister Fu? Chu Li frowned. How does she have such a profound cultivation level? His cultivation level was not what it used to be. He originally thought that there were few people who could match up to him in the Outland, but he did not expect to meet a woman who could threaten him. It was really too frightening. Was the Taihao Peak really that powerful? Senior Sister Fu. Sun Mingyue smiled. The youth champion of Taihao Peak. Chu Li was stunned. She's the Taihao Peak's champion? She was young and petite, so she did not look like the champion. Moreover, Taihao Peak was not a female sect. It was dominated by men, so it should be a man. Don't I look like one? Sun Mingyue smiled. Her qualifications are better than ours and her comprehension is amazing. No matter how profound the martial arts are, she can learn it in one go and master it after a while. Chu Li said, There's actually such a person? It's said that Senior Sister Fu is someone with innate wisdom. She was a disciple of Taihao Peak in her past life. After cultivating a unique secret skill, she reincarnated and cultivated again, just like the Titanium Temple's 10 Lives of Buddhahood technique. Chu Li was surprised. Taihao Peak has such a secret skill? Sun Mingyue said, There is such a secret skill, but the requirements to cultivate it are very strict. Even among the disciples of Taihao Peak, there are only a few who can cultivate it, and there's not even one disciple in a generation. It's said that ever since Taihao Peak was built, there were a total of 20 disciples who cultivated this secret skill, and all of them became the world's champion. The status of Taihao Peak today is all thanks to these 20 disciples. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. If that's the case, Senior Sister Fu will also become the world's champion? If nothing unexpected happens, no one in the world will be a match for her. Sun Mingyue smiled at him. Do you feel the pressure? Chu Li said, I don't have the ambition to become the world's champion. Sun Mingyue rolled her eyes at him. You don't mean what you say. You have to work harder, or you'll be suppressed by her. Chu Li frowned. Can you cultivate this secret skill? Sun Mingyue shook her head. Shao Qi and I can't. Chu Li sighed. Sun Mingyue said, Those with amazing talents still appear among the Celestials. People like us from the lower realm have limited qualifications, so we don't have that much ambition. Chu Li nodded. Sun Mingyue said, If you want to kill Azura, you'll have to find a way to get the Divine Light Sword. Chu Li said, I heard that the Divine Light Sword isn't in the Grandmaster's realm, but the Heavenly Demonic realm. It should be true. Sun Mingyue nodded. The Divine Light Sword is very mysterious. It's much stronger than the Sky Killer Sword, and it can even destroy Azura. Chu Li frowned. Then why did Azura release it? If it could really destroy Azura, Azura would have hidden it long ago to prevent it from becoming a threat. They would not have used the Divine Light Sword as bait to create a bloodbath. Therefore, this rumor was not reliable. The Divine Light Sword could not destroy Azura, but Azura deliberately spread this rumor to increase people's desire for the Divine Light Sword so that the Celestials would fight for it more fiercely. Sun Mingyue said, There's a contradiction in this, but no matter what, this sword is really extraordinary. Chu Li nodded. I'll find a way to get it. Chapter 2168. She was very confident in Chu Li's methods. She felt that although the world was big and there were countless heroes and masters, few could compare to Chu Li. Not only did he have amazing martial arts, he also had amazing intelligence. If he wanted to, he could take the divine light sword. Sun Mingyue said a few more words to him before floating away. Chu Li stood at the peak and thought for a while. When he returned to the city of 10,000 swords, he found that the disciples were gradually returning. But he didn't see Zhu Lingying and the others. Chu Li found it strange and disappeared from the city of 10,000 swords. The next moment, he appeared in a huge city and saw Zhu Lingying, Hu Tianfang, and 4 others fighting. 10 middle-aged men surrounded them, all dressed in green. Their swordsmanship was exquisite, suppressing Zhu Lingying and the others to the point where they couldn't breathe. Zhu Lingying and the others used a sword array, and the 10 middle-aged men also used a sword array, which was better than the 6 from the city of 10,000 swords. Zhu Lingying was already hit, his face pale. Hu Tianfang roared, "Qin, do you really want to turn against us? So what if we do?" A handsome middle-aged man with a sunny smile shouted, sneaking around, "Do you think you deserve the divine light sword? Qin Hao, don't you know that the divine light sword is fake?" Hu Tianfang scoffed, "Why fight? Then hand it over first," Qin Hao said. "I don't care if it's real or fake, as long as you hand it over, we will let you go. If we hand it over just because you say so, doesn't that mean the city of 10,000 swords is afraid of Thousand Illusion City?" Hu Tianfang laughed coldly. "Just you wait, our reinforcements will be here soon." "Alright, us too, I want to see how many masters there are." Qin Hao laughed. Chu Li frowned in confusion and used the omniscient mirror to observe. Soon, he found out the details from a master from Thousand Illusion City. Thousand Illusion City suddenly received news that the divine light sword was in the hands of the city of 10,000 swords. Moreover, 6 masters from the city of 10,000 swords were in this city, so they surrounded them and forced them to hand over the divine light sword. As for the news that the divine light sword was fake, it was a rumor spread by the heaven-shaking tower. However, everyone was skeptical. The heaven-shaking tower might not lie, but the power of the divine light sword this time was too strong. It could even kill an Azura. For such a divine sword, there was nothing wrong with lying. Everyone felt that the news from the heaven-shaking pavilion might not be true. If it was true, how could even Great Sky Peak be mobilized? The elites of the 9 divisions were all on the move. Whether the divine light sword was real or fake, the elites of the 9 divisions could not be bothered at all. They disdained to compete with the other sections. Chu Li pondered as he observed their battle. It seemed like this time, the 9 tribes did not have good intentions either. They purposely disturbed the public and made it difficult to determine whether the news about the heaven-shaking pavilion was true or false, thus causing a massacre. They were taking the opportunity to weaken the strength of the other sections. He secretly shook his head and sighed. It was really hard to guard against people's deceit. Now, even he had his doubts. Had the divine light sword reached the sky demon realm? Was the heaven-shaking tower telling the truth? Was the heaven-shaking tower really not greedy for the divine light sword? Even if the divine light sword could kill an Azura? Was it true that the divine light sword was a conspiracy by an Azura? Hu Tianfang and the others kept getting injured. Fortunately, none of them were fatally wounded, so they could still hold on. However, they were a little anxious. If they did not come to help, they would not be able to hold on much longer. If this went on, the treasured sword would be snatched away. Hu Tianfang, give up. We have masters to stop you too. Qin Hao laughed. Just hand it over obediently and we'll let you go. The next time we meet, we'll still be friends. Bullsh *T friends. Hu Tianfang laughed coldly. The next time we meet, we'll be enemies. Then you'll have to get through this first. Qin Hao chuckled. If you don't hand it over, we'll have to kill you. Hu Tianfang scoffed. If you hand it over, you'll die. If you don't hand it over, you'll die too. Qin Hao said, Brother Hu, there's no need to kill you. Anyway, the masters from your sects have come. They all know that the sword has fallen into our hands. There's no need for us to silence them, is there? All right, then stop. Hu Tianfang shouted in a low voice. Qin Hao hurriedly waved his hand. The 9 masters in green retreated and pointed their swords at the 6 of them. Qin Hao smiled. Now you can hand it over, right? Hu Tianfang scoffed. If you want to hand it over, that's fine. But let the 5 of them go first. Hall leader, Zhu Lungying hurriedly said. We'll advance and retreat together. You'll only be a burden if you stay. Hu Tianfang said angrily. Less? Gather? Intercourse and wordplay? Luan cabin Pao Peng Zhu yes. Zhu Lungying helplessly lowered his head. Hu Tianfang turned to look at Qin Hao. Let them go. I'll stay. I'll only hand over the sword when they're far away. If they don't agree, we'll fight to the death. At least we can take a few with us before we die. Brother Hu, you're joking. Qin Hao smiled. The sword is with them. If they leave, they'll take the sword with them. Where can I get the sword? Killing you is useless. Hu Tianfang scoffed. Only I know where the sword is. They don't know. Oh. Qin Hao tilted his head and looked at him. Brother Hu, there's no use stalling for time. Hu Tianfang frowned. Enough nonsense. Do you agree or not? If you agree, hand over the sword. If not, then die. All right. Qin Hao nodded. The lives of the 6 of you are not valuable. The sword is the key. I'll bet on you this time. I'll trust Brother Hu. Let the 5 of them go. The group hesitated and took a few steps back. Hu Tianfang said angrily, Get out of here. Don't drag me down. Hall leader, be careful. Zhu Lungying said. The 5 of them flew away and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Qin Hao watched them leave. He turned to look at Hu Tianfang. Brother Hu, are you satisfied this time? Where's the sword? It's with me. Hu Tianfang untied a sword from his back and tossed it to Qin Hao. This is the sword you wanted. Qin Hao looked at Hu Tianfang doubtfully. He then looked down at the sword in his hand. He could not believe that he had obtained it so easily. He pressed on the hilt and slowly opened it. Suddenly, a cold air filled the room. The sword seemed to contain the moonlight. It was clear that it was not an ordinary sword. This is the divine light sword? Qin Hao looked at Hu Tianfang doubtfully. Hu Tianfang scoffed. Did you think it was fake because I gave it to you so easily? The swordsmithing skills of the city of 10,000 swords are quite good. We might not be able to recognize a fake one, Qin Hao said. Hu Tianfang said coldly, We can't be sure if it's real or fake. Maybe someone used a fake to fool us. But this is definitely not a sword we forged. I can swear to the heavens. So, it's a real sword? Qin Hao asked hesitantly. Hu Tianfang scoffed. We'll have to identify the real one when we bring it back. We can't be sure. You can see for yourselves. We won't lose our lives for such an unpredictable sword. That's true. Qin Hao said, Then swear to the heavens that this is the sword you stole. Chapter 2169. Qin Hao waved his sword and nodded in satisfaction. The sword nodded in satisfaction. Looks like it's true. Brother Hu, you can leave now. Hu Tianfang smiled faintly. Are you really going to let me go? Qin Hao said, We are friends after all. Hu Tianfang sneered. What about the 5 of them? They are not my friends. You know what I mean. Qin Hao showed a helpless expression. I can't sacrifice my personal interest. Letting you go is the limit of what I can do. All right, we will meet again, Hu Tianfang said in a deep voice. He turned to leave but found Qin Hao holding his sword and retreating. The other 9 people surrounded him and attacked him. Ding 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 ding. Hu Tianfang sneered. I knew it! Qin Hao took a few steps back and sheathed his sword. Brother Hu, I can let you go, but they can't. I didn't break my promise, did I? Not really. Hu Tianfang gritted his teeth and said coldly, I hope you can kill me today. Otherwise, the next time we meet, I will kill you. Sigh. We are friends, but we have to fight each other. I feel bad. Qin Hao shook his head and sighed. He looked regretful. Brother Hu, I'm sorry. Hu Tianfang sneered and shook his head. You sent people to deal with them, didn't you? Brother Hu, you know me well. Qin Hao nodded. But I might not kill them. It depends on their luck. All right, goodbye then. Hu Tianfang shook his head and disappeared from everyone's swords in a flash. The 9 people's expressions changed. They swept their swords, but Hu Tianfang was nowhere to be seen. Motherf *Ker, how cunning! Qin Hao slammed his palm. The other 9 people were also angry. They felt like they had been tricked by Hu Tianfang. Brother Qin, this sword is real, right? A middle-aged man asked. Qin Hao shook his head. I don't know if it's real or not. I think it's not real. As he spoke, he drew out his original long sword and clashed with this long sword. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and the original long sword immediately broke into 2. Qin Hao burst into laughter. Or is it really impossible? He felt that it was too easy for it to be real. He never would have thought that the sword would be so sharp. Although his longsword was not a treasured sword, it was still a top-notch longsword. Its sharpness and toughness far surpassed that of ordinary longswords. To be able to break it so easily, it was definitely a treasured sword. It might not necessarily be untrue. The other 9 people's expressions softened. Through the omniscient mirror, Chu Li knew that this sword was not a top-notch treasure sword at all. It was just a little sharper, so he did not think much of it. Compared to the unparalleled Heaven Regicide sword, the Moon Frost sword, and the blood-dripping sword, it was much weaker. He directly appeared where Zhu Lingying and the others were. The 5 of them were surrounded by the 6 old men, surrounded by the endless sword lights, unable to extricate themselves. The situation was precarious, and the 5 of them were all injured. Their movements were sluggish, and the number of sword strikes they received increased. The 6 old men were all dressed in linen robes. Their faces were solemn, and they seemed to be carved from the same mold. The longsword turned into a clear light, and the blade could not be seen clearly. It was dense and exquisite, and was already superior to Zhu Lingying and the others. Moreover, they had the advantage in numbers, and the power of the sword formation was even stronger. Zhu Lingying's right arm was already hit, and he had no strength to fight back. He used his left hand to swing the longsword, and blood dripped onto the ground from time to time. He gritted his teeth and swung the sword with all his might. He was very unwilling. He did not think that he would really die here as a disciple of the City of 10,000 Swords. It was just a massacre between celestials, and his death was meaningless. Although he had a treasure now, it could only conceal his aura, and could not increase his strength. If there was no other way, he could only use the heavenly demonic disintegration technique. He would drag them down with him even before he died, and even win a chance for his companions to survive. He had always lived in the City of 10,000 Swords, and he had unknowingly developed feelings for it. Just as he was about to cast the technique, he suddenly heard Chu Li's voice. "Senior, head east." Then, a whistling sound was heard. Several small stones flew through the air toward the 6 old men. These 6 stones seemed to have suddenly appeared in front of the 6 old men. They could not dodge in time, and could only swing their swords to block them. Ding, 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 ding. The 6 old men's faces were flushed red, and their expressions were gloomy. Zhu Lingying hurriedly shouted, "Go!" He did not have the time to think about anything else, and fled toward the east. The other 4 hurriedly followed. They were all heavily injured, and as they used their light body technique, they consumed spirit medicine at the same time. After the spirit medicine entered their stomachs, their injuries slowed down. The spirit medicine they had on them was extraordinary, and they had been specially given to them by the city of 10,000 swords to deal with this kind of desperate situation. Hearing the continuous clear sounds coming from behind them, they ran faster and faster. After running for more than 20 miles, their injuries were greatly alleviated, and they immediately used void diversion, vanishing from where they were. They appeared in the outer city of 10,000 swords, and immediately fell to the ground, almost unconscious. With their injuries, it was extremely difficult for them to use void diversion, and they were already lucky to be able to return. As soon as the people in the city saw him, they immediately reported to the inner city, and soon, someone came to bring them into the inner city. After suppressing the 6 old men, Chu suddenly disappeared in a flash, and the next moment, he appeared in the depths of a dense forest outside the city, and saw 4 people engaged in a fierce battle. 3 old men in hemp robes were fighting against an old man in purple robes, and Chu recognized this old man in purple robes. It was the mayor of the city of 10,000 swords, Guobairu. Guobairu was tall and burly, and his appearance was ordinary, but his aura was shocking. It was not an oppressive feeling formed by his energy, but the shocking aura formed by his body and appearance, like a lion that gave people a sense of danger. The 3 old men in hemp robes looked like old men, and their haggard faces did not match their strong and agile bodies. It was as if they were wearing the masks of old men, but the bodies of young men. Although their body techniques were strong and agile, and their swordsmanship was exquisite, they were still suppressed by Guobairu to the point that they could not breathe. Guobairu's sword was like lightning, and it was as if every strike was accompanied by lightning, emitting a shocking aura that frightened people's souls, making it difficult for them to directly face him. "You people from Thousand Illusion City are quite bold," Guobairu said coldly. "Have you thought about the consequences?" The 3 old men in hemp robes had solemn expressions, and without a word they swung their swords, barely managing to block, afraid that they would be distracted by talking and die. With Guobairu's swordsmanship and cultivation level, 1 hit was enough to be fatal. Guobairu said, "Stop now, and I will not pursue this matter. Mayor Guo, it's useless." One of the old men in hemp robes shook his head and sighed. "I was ordered to block the mayor, but it may be too late now. We have already obtained the treasured sword." "Humph, if that's the case, you are deliberately seeking death." Guobairu laughed coldly, and the light of his sword suddenly brightened. He was anxious and angry. They had spent so much effort to obtain the treasured sword. Could it be that Thousand Illusion City was going to be the fishermen that reaped the benefits? Damn it! The 3 old men's expressions changed slightly, and their movements suddenly became sluggish. Facing Guobairu's long sword, they did not dodge, and let the long sword slash across their necks, and 3 heads rolled to the ground. "You overestimate yourself." Guobairu laughed coldly, and without looking at the headless corpses that were still standing upright, he turned to leave. Chu frowned. This swordsmanship was really strange, and it was actually somewhat similar to the Sky Regicide sword. It seemed like it was one of the 9 swords. Chapter 2170. Yang Gaogong. Guobairu sneered and said, "You've got some guts, insisting on going against this old man. What a joke." Yang Gaogong's figure flickered, and the 3 corpses fell to the ground. A look of pity appeared on his small face as he shook his head and sighed. "The Divine Light Sword is ownerless. You can take it, but our Thousand Illusion City can't? Isn't the city of 10,000 swords in charge of the world? So you're saying that you want to fight to the death?" Guobairu said coldly. Yang Gaogong nodded his head and said, "Even if I can't snatch the Divine Light Sword, it would be good to snatch the Sword of Leeching from your hands." "Heh, what wishful thinking!" Guobairu shook his head and sneered. What's the use of snatching the leeching sword? Besides, this old man isn't someone you can snatch just because you want to. Then let me experience City Lord Gua's miraculous skill, Yang Gaogong said indifferently. This old man has only recently mastered our Thousand Illusions City's Thousand Illusions sword. Very good, I was just about to see it for myself. Guobairu snorted, waving his sword lightly and stabbing forward. Yang Gaogong stood there in a daze, as if he was going to be stabbed. Chu Li had already seen this move clearly and shook his head. At first glance, the sword of Liqing seemed to be no different from the heaven-slaughtering sword. They both made the other party obediently accept death, but they were completely different. The sword of Liqing was a sword that bewitched the heart, making the other party immersed in the feelings of parting, melancholy, loneliness, laziness, and not wanting to move. This slight delay was enough to kill them. However, the heaven-killing sword used an invisible force to bind the opponent. It was not that they did not want to dodge, but because they were bound by the force, they were unable to dodge and could only forcefully endure the heaven-killing sword. These 9 swords indeed had their own special abilities. The sword of Liqing seemed to be the easiest to break, but as one's martial arts deepened, it became extremely difficult to break. It killed people without a trace and was impossible to guard against. The momentum that the sword of Liqing exuded was not an illusion like a magic circle, but a real power that directly pulled people into the realm of parting, evoking memories and even pain in their hearts. Chu Li reckoned that even if he had a treasure that could calm his mind, it would be useless. He would not be able to withstand this sword of Liqing. Ding! A sword tip suddenly appeared in front of Yang Gaogong's neck, blocking the sword of Liqing. Both of them took a step back. Yang Gaogong narrowed his eyes as his heart turned cold. His back was covered with a layer of cold sweat. He thought to himself that he had almost been tricked and failed to resist this sword. This sword of Liqing was really evil. Guobairu frowned. He didn't think that he would be able to block this sword. The sword of Liqing often killed with one strike. If the first strike couldn't kill the opponent, then the remaining strike needed to be pushed to the extreme, which required a great price. After that, the user would be depressed for a long time. Yang Gaogong heaved a long sigh of relief and said lightly, "City Governor Gua, take my sword as well." He took a step forward, already arriving in front of Guobairu, a clear light enveloping him. Guobairu brandished his sword and turned into a ray of light. Chi! Guobairu quickly retreated a step. He was both shocked and angry. His right shoulder had already been pierced by the sword, blood was gushing out. He frowned at Yang Gaogong and took a deep breath. Great sword technique. Even with his treasured robe, he was unable to block the tip of the sword. This was not surprising, as the treasured robe alone could not block someone as profound as Yang Gaogong. It was already good enough for him to block most of the sword energy. What surprised him was that he couldn't defend against this elusive sword. Chu Li, who was hiding in the dark, was also shocked. This sword was really strange. The clear water-like sword light earlier was just an illusion, the long sword was not in it, but hidden in the void. The clear light sword light illusion required the sword force to be fast enough, and hiding in the void was the wonder of the treasured sword itself and the sword technique. The moon frost sword could be hidden in the void at night, but it could not do so in the day. This is the Thousand Illusion sword? Guobairu quickly pointed 2 fingers at his shoulder and switched to his left hand to hold the sword. He said lightly, "As expected, the power is amazing. I've just mastered it, sorry for the embarrassment." Yang Gaogong smiled. He could not hide his pride. Guobairu said lightly, "But it's impossible to kill me with this sword technique alone." "Then try it." Yang Gaogong chuckled. He took a step forward and a clear light shrouded him again. Chi! Guobairu still used the sword light to meet the attack, but his left shoulder was hit by the sword. He quickly took 2 steps back, his face gloomy. He focused on the sword outside the clear light, but he did not expect the tip of the sword to suddenly come out from the clear light. It was impossible to guard against, and it was incredibly fast. He could not dodge it in time. He was hit again. Both his left and right shoulder were hit. "Ha ha!" Yang Gaogong laughed out loud. He shook his head and said, "Governor Guo, you disappoint me. Is that all you've got?" Guo Bairu quickly pointed at his left shoulder. He frowned and said, "What a strange sword technique. To be able to witness such a sword technique, this trip was not in vain." "Then I'll send you on your way." Yang Gaogong laughed out loud. He swung his sword, and once again, a clear light shrouded Guo Bairu. Guo Bairu held the sword in his right hand. He felt weak and powerless, as if he could not exert any strength at all. He watched as the clear light shrouded his body, but just as it was about to hit him, he suddenly turned sideways and smiled. Yang Gaogong's movement strangely slowed down, and the sword force was easily avoided. The tip of Guo Bairu's sword easily slashed across Yang Gaogong's shoulder, and his arm and sword fell down together. Guo Bairu's face instantly became as white as paper. His eyebrows and hair seemed to be dyed with a layer of frost, turning into white hair and eyebrows. He grabbed the Thousand Illusion sword, took a step back, and stood firmly. He laughed and said, "Governor Yang, how was it? What a good sword of Li Qing." Yang Gaogong caught his right arm with his left hand and pressed it on his right shoulder. He said coldly, "I was careless this time, but Governor Guo, you can't kill me." "Then next time," Guo Bairu said coldly. After activating the secret technique, he indeed did not have the strength to use another sword. Normal sword techniques could not kill Yang Gaogong. Although Yang Gaogong lost his right arm, he still had his left hand, and the sword in his left hand was not weak. If they were to fight again, Guo Bairu might not be his match. Yang Gaogong stared at the Thousand Illusion sword in Guo Bairu's hand. He said indifferently, "Give me back my sword." Guo Bairu laughed coldly. "You want to steal my sword, but since you can't, then leave your sword behind. If you don't give me back my sword, then we'll fight again." Yang Gaogong said coldly, "Stop bluffing." Both of them were wary of each other. Guo Bairu felt that he could not defeat Yang Gaogong, so he had to be even more forceful. Otherwise, if he showed weakness, Yang Gaogong would definitely take the opportunity to attack and kill him while he was weak. Yang Gaogong also could not determine how weak Guo Bairu was. He knew himself well. After losing his right arm, his vitality was greatly damaged, and his inner energy was leaking out like water, so he could not muster up any strength. Therefore, he could not show weakness. If he directly left without the Thousand Illusion sword, Guo Bairu would see through his guilty conscience and take the opportunity to kill him. Both of them wanted to bluff, neither giving way to the other. "Then I'll send you on your way." Guo Bairu laughed coldly, slowly raising his sword. A man in gray suddenly appeared behind him, lightly striking out with his palm. Bang! Guo Bairu's clothes exploded in the air, but the treasures and pills hidden on his body were all shattered. Only his armor remained to protect his body, but his body was not injured. The palm energy was completely focused on destroying the things on his body, not burrowing into his body, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. Although he was lucky, his heart sank again. The man in gray stood quietly in front of him, looking at him indifferently. Chapter 2171. Who are you? Guo Bairu stared coldly at the man in gray. He sized him up. The man in gray had a dignified appearance and looked honest. His eyes were clear, giving people a good impression of him. He felt that this person was trustworthy and upright. He felt a chill in his heart because he could not sense the depth of this person's cultivation level. He seemed like an ordinary person who did not know martial arts but was unfathomable. His intuition did not warn him, making him feel weak. Chu Li, who had transformed into the man in gray, sized Guobiru up. Guobiru looked weak, but his aura was soaring. It was like a rolling snowball that was getting stronger and stronger. It was brewing an earth-shattering attack that was frightening. He glanced at Yang Gaogong and said, "Governor Yang, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Who are you?" Yang Gaogong asked, "What grudge do you have against us?" Chu Li smiled. "Actually, it was a coincidence and a stroke of luck to meet you two. It was a stroke of luck to witness the Leeching Sword and the Thousand Illusion Sword. As for the outcome, it's not up to us." "Aren't you adding insult to injury?" Yang Gaogong asked. He had been holding onto his right arm. His face was pale, and he looked battered and weak, but his expression was as calm as still water. He looked at Chu Li and said, "Your Excellency's appearance is real, and you're not wearing a mask. Are you not planning to keep us alive?" He glanced at Guobiru. Guobiru suddenly swung his arm, and the Thousand Illusion Sword shot out. Yang Gaogong caught the Thousand Illusion Sword with his left hand and nodded in satisfaction. "Governor Guo, the world is so unpredictable. It's amazing. Both of us will have to fight the enemy together." He had personally experienced the vicissitudes of life, and his understanding of the word illusion had deepened. His understanding of the Thousand Illusion Sword had also deepened. Even though he could only use his left hand to execute the Thousand Illusion Sword, its power was not inferior to when he used his right hand. Chu Li looked at the two and nodded. "All right, since the two of you want to fight together, it's fine. If you can take one strike from me, you can do whatever you want to me," Guobiru said. Chu Li shook his head. "I'm not interested in you, Governor Guo. I'm interested in your Leeching Sword." "All right, if you can take one strike from me, the Leeching Sword belongs to you," Guobiru said. "Take this." He took a light step forward and the sword glided towards Chu Li's neck. Yang Gaogong used the Thousand Illusion Sword at the same time and leaped towards Chu Li with a clear light. Chu Li's left hand slapped lightly, and the entire void seemed to have frozen. The inner energy that the cloud-slashing palm had activated was formed from the spiritual energy of the upper heavens, and its power was astonishing. Both of them stopped moving at the same time. Chu Li formed his hand into a claw and activated the celestial demonic claw. He grabbed hold of the two men's long swords and easily retrieved them. At the same time, his body flashed and swept past their bodies. The scabbards were already in his hands. Chu Li stood 20 feet away and smiled at the two of them. He nodded and said, "Great swordsmanship. Goodbye." "Who you?" Yang Gaogong yelled. Although the two of them were in a weakened state, they were still unable to withstand a single move. This was hard for him to believe. He wouldn't be satisfied until he found out the other party's identity. "Chu. Are you a disciple of Taihao Peak?" Yang Gaogong yelled. Chu Li smiled and was about to speak when a sweet voice rang in his mind. "Leave now." He knew it was Sun Mingwei using the Supreme King Kong to send him a message. His expression did not change, but he disappeared from where he was and broke through the void to leave. The next moment, 3 women in white appeared in the void and looked down at the two men. Fu Kaiwei looked at the two of them and shook her head. "City Lord Guo, City Lord Yang, are you trying to perish together?" The two men looked up and saw the 3 women. Their expressions changed. "You are?" Guobiru's heart tightened. His pale face regained its calmness as he cupped his fists and asked warmly. His tall figure was slightly hunched, as if he had aged for many years. Coupled with his snow-white hair and eyebrows, he looked even more aged. Fu Kaiwei's delicate eyebrows, which were not covered by the white veil, knitted together and said indifferently, "I am Fu Kaiwei." Yang Gaogong asked, "Taihao Peak?" "Yes." Fu Kaiwei said, "You two are here because of that sword, right?" "We did have a fight." Yang Gaogong nodded. Fu Kaiwei smiled. "You two are really close. You didn't use a sword." Guobiru and Yang Gaogong were embarrassed. They did not want to say that their swords were stolen. Fu Kaiwei had no intention of letting them go. She said with a smile, "But you too are swordsmen. You should always have your swords with you, right?" Well, the two hesitated. Fu Kaiwei said, "The sword you snatched is just a normal treasure sword. It's not the divine light sword. That's why I wanted to inform you so that you won't fight to the death and realize that it's all for naught." "What treasure sword is it?" Guobairu asked. Fu Kaiwei said, "It's a treasure sword that Taihao Peak lost in the foreign battlefield. Although it's a treasure sword, it's not that valuable. It's far from the divine light sword." "So, Miss Fu wants to take back the sword?" Guopairu asked in a low voice. "That won't be necessary." Fu Kaiwei shook her head. "You can keep it if you want. I'm just telling you the truth. Alright, you two can continue fighting. We won't disturb you. I'm not afraid of Miss Fu laughing at us." Guobairu said, "When we were fighting and both of us were injured, a guy suddenly jumped out and snatched our swords. My leeching sword and City Lord Yang's Thousand Illusions sword were both stolen by him." Fu Kaiwei was surprised. "Who would have the guts to do that? I suspected that he was a disciple of your Taihao Peak. His cultivation level is extremely high." Guobairu said. Yang Gaogong shook his head and sighed. "Even if we weren't injured, we wouldn't be his match. He really is a top-notch expert. I'm afraid he's really a disciple of Taihao Peak. Only the three of us came from Taihao Peak." Fu Kaiwei shook her head. "So he's not from Taihao Peak. That's strange. Who in the world has such a cultivation level?" Guobairu frowned. He was quite proud of his martial arts. Even in a weakened state, the power of the leeching sword was shocking. It was not something an ordinary expert could block. Even the top-notch experts of the world couldn't block it, unless it was a supreme expert at Fu Kaiwei's level. "What kind of martial arts is he using?" Fu Kaiwei asked. Guobairu's figure flashed. Then, his palms turned into claws and lightly grabbed the invisible sword. "Flying Deity's Demonic Claw." Fu Kaiwei scoffed. Guobairu frowned. "Flying Deity's Demonic Claw? Flying Heaven Sect's Heavenly Demon?" "Yes." Fu Kaiwei sighed. "I didn't expect a heavenly demon to join in the fun. Looking at his cultivation level, he's a great heavenly demon. I really don't know what the heaven-shaking pavilion is doing." "Senior Sister Fu, we're not doing nothing." A clear voice suddenly sounded. Three young men in loose robes appeared in the void in front of them. The one in front was Zhao Haiyuan. He cupped his fists and said, "Senior Sister Fu, how have you been?" "Very well." Fu Kaiwei rolled her eyes at him. "Yum? Gather? Egg mulberry?" Qiu Qiao Feng Huang was stunned. Chapter 2172. Thank you for your concern. Guobairu's expression was dark. His every move was being calculated by the heaven-shaking tower. This was not a good feeling. Yang Gaogong said, "If the heaven-shaking tower can't find this guy, it looks like we won't be able to get our swords back. However, with our swords we should be able to find some clues. The heaven-shaking tower can use the swords to find them, right?" "Not necessarily." Zhao Haiyuan shook his head with his hands behind his back. He was proud and said, "If we can really find him, we can find him without your swords. Since we can't find him, your swords are useless." "He has a treasure on him that can hide his aura?" Guobairu asked in a low voice. Zhao Haiyuan nodded. "As expected of City Governor Guo." Guobairu said, "Are we, the Grandmaster, going to let a great sky demon do as he pleases? If he makes a move, we can find him." Zhao Haiyuan smiled. "As long as he uses the heavenly demonic power to change the world, even if we can't find him, we can find where he is doing things." "He still managed to escape this time." Fu Kaiwei pouted. The white veil did not completely cover her face. Everyone could see her disdain. Zhao Haiyuan frowned and said, Senior Sister Fu, you don't believe me? The heaven-shaking tower is getting worse. Fu Kaiwei scoffed. From this incident we can see that your influence is declining. No one believes you. After all, this is a serious matter. Zhao Haiyuan said, greed blinds one's mind. City Governor Guo and the others believe you, but they still think they can get away with it. In the end, not only did they not gain anything, but they also lost many soldiers. It's not worth it. Fu Kaiwei said, if the heaven-shaking tower is so powerful, there wouldn't be so much trouble. Senior Sister Fu's words are a little extreme, Zhao Haiyuan said disapprovingly. The divine light sword is so tempting. Even the heaven-shaking peak would be tempted, let alone them. Nonsense! Fu Kaiwei shouted. Zhao Haiyuan, you're asking for a beating. Senior Sister Fu, why are you so angry? Zhao Haiyuan smiled. I'm just guessing. The heaven-shaking peak shouldn't be so nosy and worry for the world. We just can't bear to watch as the entire sky beyond Avalon is being toyed around. Fu Kaiwei snorted and said, forget it. If your heaven-shaking tower can't find this great sky fiend, then our heaven-shaking peak will. Oh! Zhao Haiyuan smiled. Senior Sister Fu can find it? City Lord Guo, let me borrow your blood. Fu Kaiwei snorted. Guopairu replied, feel free to do as you please, Miss Fu. May I know how to find the great sky demon? Heaven and earth reversal technique, Fu Kaiwei said. Even if I told you, you wouldn't have heard of it. City Lord Guo, give me a palm strike. As she spoke, she lightly struck Guobairu with her palm. Guobairu reached out to meet it. Bang! He felt his inner force enter Fu Kaiwei's body without any hindrance. Following that, he felt a pain in his wrist. He discovered that there was a bloody mark on his wrist. Fu Kaiwei had silently cut his wrist and drawn his blood. He was shocked. Fu Kaiwei lived up to her reputation as the top youth master of Heaven Peak. He was no match for her. Even if he was prepared, he would not have been able to avoid the gentle stroke of her finger. Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue had been standing in the void without saying a word. It was as if they were purely watching the show, so much so that they were easily overlooked. Under Fu Kaiwei's dazzling radiance, they looked dull even though their faces were covered. They had purposely restrained their aura to reach a level where others could not see them. When they saw that Fu Kaiwei was going to use a secret skill to track down the great sky demon, the two women looked at each other and were secretly anxious. Sun Mingyue and Shao Qi were certain that the person they were looking for was Chu Li. Due to their unique senses, they knew Chu Li's location. Although they would lose their senses if they were too far away due to the Earth Demon Stone's suppression, they could still sense him if they were close. Although the two women were anxious, they did not act rashly. If they could not find him, it would not be too late to attack at the crucial moment. Now that they were very close to Chu Li, they still hoped that they could get lucky. Chu Li was smart, so he would definitely be able to avoid their senses. Fu Kaiwei squinted her eyes and did not move as if she was meditating. Everyone had the same feeling. It was as if she was only left with a shell and had lost her spirit. It was as if her soul had left her body and gone far away. The Fu Kaiwei in front of them was just a walking corpse. Shao Qi and Sun Mingyue took 2 steps forward and protected Fu Kaiwei from both sides. Zhao Haiyuan and the other 2 landed on the ground and stared at Fu Kaiwei. Guobairu and Yang Gaogong became even more anxious as they stared at Fu Kaiwei. After a quarter of an hour, Fu Kaiwei opened her eyes. A puzzled look flashed across her face, but she did not say a word. Senior Sister Fu, did you find him? Zhao Haiyuan smiled faintly. He knew at first glance that Fu Kaiwei had not found the great sky demon. Although he felt it was a pity, he was also relieved. If she had really found him, Heaven-Shaking Pavilion's reputation would be tarnished. Their martial arts were not as good as Taihao Peak's, and their divination was even worse. Heaven-Shaking Pavilion would lose face. Fu Kaiwei shook her head. There's something strange about this guy. I can't believe we couldn't find him. If it's that easy to find him, we would have found him long ago, Zhao Haiyuan quickly said. Humph. Fu Kaiwei pouted. We let him escape this time. He must have immediately placed his sword in a strange place. There's a power that isolates him, so we can't sense him. This guy is really cunning, Zhao Haiyuan said. He's very difficult to deal with. Previously, he had not been able to sense the great sky demon. He only deduced that something was wrong with Guo Bairu and Yang Gaogong based on the general trend of the world, so he went to look for them. In the end, he was still one step too late. They could predict this, but they could not predict that person. It was as if he was shrouded in a layer of fog. He was faintly discernible, as if he did not exist, but he really did exist. He knew that the great sky demon had a treasure on him, which was why he could not predict him. This was very troublesome. The great sky demon's destructive power was shocking, especially one that could hide its identity. When he thought about this, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart, and he was secretly worried. Once the great sky demon did something earth-shattering, the heaven-shaking tower would not be able to escape the blame. They would be embarrassed and become the target of everyone's anger. He sighed. We couldn't predict him, and neither could Senior Sister Fu. This guy is so difficult to deal with. I'm afraid he'll bring disaster to the world in the future. This is really a predestined fate. Looks like we'll have to pay a huge price. Fu Kaiwei scoffed. She pulled out a Buddha statue from her neck and stared at it without moving. Everyone stared at it. The small Buddha statue was exquisite. Unlike the gentle luster of white jade, it shone brilliantly as if there was a strong light shining on it. It was dazzling, so it was obviously not an ordinary object. Sun Mingyue, who was initially relieved, became anxious again. She asked, Senior Sister Fu, what's this? This is my talisman. Fu Kaiwei scoffed. It contains an unbelievable power. This power can break the great sky demon's power isolation. I want to see where he is. If it's a talisman, it's better to be careful, Shao-Chi said softly. Senior Sister Fu, what if it's in vain? Why don't we solve it in private? We can't let Zhao Haiyuan laugh at us, Fu Kaiwei said. Let's try here. I don't believe we can't find that guy. Chapter 2173. The two women were helpless. They knew that it would be too deliberate to stop her. Fu Kaiwei was smart enough to see through it. Sun Mingyue sensed Chu Li through the Supreme Vajra in her mind and soon found out. She could not help but be overjoyed and quickly told Chu Li about what happened here. Fu Kaiwei's secret skill was blocked by the Chakram Pagoda, but not the Supreme Vajra scripture's power. After all, the Chakram Pagoda's power was his power and he could control it freely. Chu Li sat in the Chakram Pagoda and frowned. It seemed that he had underestimated Fu Kaiwei. She was the youth champion of Taihao Peak. She could track him and even find him in the Chakram Pagoda. That was troublesome. He deduced from the Heavenly Star Insight technique that his cultivation level was still lower than Fu Kaiwei's. He had a fortuitous encounter and had the help of the spiritual energy from the upper heaven. His cultivation level had increased by more than 2 times, but he was still no match for Fu Kaiwei. If it was before, there would be a huge gap between them. After some thought, Chu Li realized that although he had a fortuitous encounter, Fu Kaiwei had an even greater advantage. She had the best aptitude, the best cultivation environment, the best heart technique, and even more spirit medicine and mystical fruits to help her. These were his weaknesses, so it was not surprising that Fu Kaiwei could suppress him. Although the life and death scripture was powerful and the omniscient mirror was beyond imagination, his cultivation level was still low and he could not rely on them to dominate the world. The Chakram Pagoda's power was very strange. It was different from the power that people cultivated. It was similar to the power of the soul, which was the purest and most primitive power in the world. Chu Li thought for a while and said to Sun Mingyue, "Don't worry about me. I have a way. Senior Sister Fu is the youth champion of Taihao Peak and even the Grandmaster of Heaven Realm. It's best not to fight her." Sun Mingyue's voice sounded in his mind. "I want to test her ability," Chu Li said. Sigh. "All right." Sun Mingyue sighed helplessly and did not try to persuade him. She knew that Chu Li was proud. Even if his cultivation level was not as high as Fu Caiwei's, he wanted to test her to see how big the gap was so that he would be more motivated to cultivate and pursue. If she continued to persuade him, she would be looking down on him. Chu Li squinted his eyes and sat cross-legged in front of the two swords, sizing up the Leeching Sword and the Thousand Illusion Sword. The two swords were placed in the center of the first level of the revolving wheel pagoda. They were in a special position, where the power of the revolving wheel pagoda was the densest. Chu Li formed a seal with his hands and began to activate his heart technique step by step. The energy of the 6 chakram pagodas around him gathered around the two swords and became increasingly concentrated. Chu Li even extracted the inner energy of all the chakram pagodas that he had built and gathered it here. These chakra pagodas were not only from the sky beyond heavens, there were also chakra pagodas from the lower realm and even from the heavenly demon realm. Strands of power slowly passed through the void and arrived at the chakra pagoda, wrapping around the two swords. Fu Caiwei stared at the jade Buddha statue in her hand. Her eyes flickered with reluctance. This was her amulet. It was given to her by her mother when she was young. If it was destroyed, it would be gone forever. No matter how bad an item was, it would be sentimental to carry it for more than 20 years, let alone her mother's jade Buddha. Senior Sister Fu, let's forget about it. Zhao Haiyuan smiled faintly. We'll let him go this time. The next time he makes a move, we'll definitely find him. Fu Caiwei remained silent. Zhao Haiyuan said, "This time, he must be prepared. We'll have more confidence in taking action when he's unprepared." Fu Caiwei gritted her teeth and shook her head. "I'd like to see what he's capable of." As soon as she finished speaking, she closed her eyes and pressed the jade Buddha statue against her forehead. A moment later, a ray of light burst forth and the jade Buddha statue turned into a dazzling ray of light. It was as if the sun had fallen in front of her forehead. Everyone else could not open their eyes. Only Zhao Haiyuan squinted his eyes and activated his secret skill to control his eyes to stare at the jade Buddha statue. He saw a strong ray of light flashing from the jade Buddha statue. Eventually, the jade Buddha statue turned into nothingness. The ray of light became more intense and finally, it entered Fu Caiwei's forehead. Fu Caiwei's white jade-like hands formed a strange seal on her forehead and pressed it against her forehead. Then, with a bang, she flew backward and spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. She fell limply to the ground. In a flash, Shao Qi caught her in the air. On the other hand, Sun Mingyue glided to their side and stared at Zhao Haiyuan and the others with cold eyes. Shao Qi helped her land gently and helped her stand firm. She asked softly, "Senior sister?" Fu Caiwei shook her head and removed the red veil on her face to reveal her beautiful face. She said softly, "He's so powerful." Zhao Haiyuan hurriedly asked, "Senior Sister Fu, did you find him?" "No." Fu Caiwei shook her head. She initially thought that with the power contained in the Jade Talisman and her secret skill, she would be able to break through the power outside the two swords and find the two swords. Then, she would be able to find the person who stole the sword. She did not expect the power to be several times or even more than 10 times stronger. Her power could not even withstand a single blow from it. If she had not reacted quickly and retreated, she would have fainted by now. Her soul was heavily injured, and it would take a long time for her to recover. Zhao Haiyuan frowned. "Is this guy that powerful?" He was aware of Fu Caiwei's cultivation level, or else she would not have been so obedient. However, he did not expect the great heavenly demon to be so difficult to deal with. The person who could hurt Fu Kaiwei was not an ordinary person, and he was definitely not a match for him. It seemed like it was not a bad thing that he could not find him. If he had found him, he might not be alive now. Fu Kaiwei said softly, "He's more powerful than I thought." Her voice was weak, as if she was seriously injured. Sun Mingyue secretly sighed in relief. She did not expect Chu Li to be able to withstand it. While Shao Qi was relieved, she secretly admired Fu Kaiwei's cunning. Her injury was not as serious as it seemed. Although it was not light, it was not that weak. Fu Kaiwei turned to look at Guo Bairu and Yang Gaogong and said weakly, "Governors, I'm sorry to disappoint you. We can't find the swords, so I advise you to give up on looking for them." "Thank you, Miss Fu." Guo Bairu gave a fist salute. He was in despair and extremely depressed, but he did not show it. He could not retrieve the heaven-killing sword, but he kept hope because he had a clear goal. Although Chu Li was powerful, he did not necessarily have a weakness. In the future, he would find a chance to take back the heaven-killing sword. It was the same for the monarch descending sword. As long as he knew who took it, he would be able to get it back. He was confident in his martial arts and technique. However, it was different this time. He had personally witnessed the great heavenly demon's power. More importantly, the great heavenly demon would definitely bring the sword back to the heavenly demonic realm. That was a place where celestials could not pry into. No matter how powerful he was, he could not go to the heavenly demonic realm to take back the leeching sword. If that happened, his dream of gathering all 9 swords would be shattered, and the city of 10,000 swords would not be able to climb to the peak. When he thought of this, he wanted to howl at the sky and cut the person who stole the sword into 1,000 pieces. Fu Kaiwei glanced at Zhao Haiyuan. "Junior brother Zhao, please excuse me." Zhao Haiyuan quickly shook his head and smiled. "I'll ask the tower leader to do it personally." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.